Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com right now and get up to 45% off select styles, plus a professional measure. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hey, Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.
in favor of the Cardinals. The pitch. Strike from the outside corner. to pitch a hitter a certain way, but when you're in trouble and a little tired, as Darlin is, he might make a mistake.
Here's the pitch.
He did.
There's a drive way back. It might be. It could be. It is. Holy cow. The Cubs are out in front. 5-4. Keith Moreland again. You sure called it, Lou.
Yes, indeed. Beautiful.
Line drive right center. Nobody's going to get this one all the way to the wall. The runner's in. Look at Dernier run. Holy cow. I'd like to have $2 on his nose. Cubs win. Cubs win. Rick Sutcliffe making his debut as a Cub at Wrigley Field has pitched a 5-hit shutout. Drive out the pitcher's game is over. Cubs win. What a lucky break. The good Lord wants the Cubs to win. This should be it. Cubs win. Cubs win. Cubs win. Holy cow. And the Cubs have swept the 4-game series. There's a drive back into center. It's well hit. It is going. Grand slam. Grand slam. Grand slam. Jody Davis. Listen to this crowd. Might as well join them. Cubs are the champion. The Cubs are the champion. The Cubs win. Look at that mob scene. Ursula got on strike. Rick Sutcliffe is 14th in a row. 16-1 for the year. He faced only 28 men. He pitched a 2-hitter. Let's just watch him. Participating advertisers in Cubs baseball are Budweiser, the king of beers and proud sponsor of the U.S. Olympic team. For all you do, this Bud's for you. Your neighborhood True Value hardware stores. Toyota's exciting cars and trucks for 1984. Toyota invites you to see them at your local dealer. Union 76 and your neighborhood Union 76 dealers, who invite you to go with the spirit of 76. Canon, the official 35mm camera of the 1984 Olympics. United Airlines, you're not just flying, you're flying the friendly skies. Zenith, see all the close-up action on the Smart Set by Zenith. At Zenith, the quality goes in before the name goes on. The Yellow Pages, it's the small investment that keeps your big investment paying off. And your Chicagoland McDonald's restaurant, where you can get all your favorite tastes in just one place. McDonald's. This copyrighted telecast is presented by authority of the Chicago National League Ball Club, which has the right of approval of the announcers and is intended solely for the private, non-commercial use of our audience. Any publication, reproduction, retransmission, or other use of the pictures, descriptions, and accounts of this game without the express written consent of the Chicago National League Ball Club is prohibited.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. We have gone from the ridiculous to the sublime in our, how many, 29 teams, 30 seasons? How many seasons?
I don't even know. If you do what, 1980 and 20, I think it's 29 seasons.
All right.
It's just some odd number.
We have reached the end, but the end is not the 2011 Cubs because, that was bad enough. No. The end of this is the season that shaped these two hosts as Cub fans forever. It's probably their fault. The 1984 Chicago Cubs. With me, as always, is Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
It's swell, Andy. I feel like I'm coming out of a hibernation here.
Hey, look, we haven't done a Remember This Crap since the Bears played the Eagles. Big game. We had Don Henley had a big game. Joe Walsh. Glenn Fry was dead. No, not that Eagles. The Philadelphia.
Right.
That's right.
The Joe Walsh coming out in the stadium, it was a real great surprise. Nobody saw that one coming.
Don Felder, still not welcome. Was not allowed to come back.
And by the way, we undersold the breadth of this project. It's 32 years.
I was going to say, wouldn't it be 32 years?
32.
I was just worried I had the years wrong. We've done every season from 1980 to 2011, except for 1984.
Yep.
As those of you who listen to them all, and I'm sure I'll put a box set together and we can sell that on Marquee. That'll be good. We get a telethon. We spun a wheel for much of this, and when it landed on it, we just had to do whatever the game was. Because this is Remember This Crap. It's not Research This Crap.
Extemporaneous.
The whole idea is, what can we remember about these seasons? We finally fessed up towards the end that long ago we had pulled 1984 off of the wheel.
Not long ago. I would say.
Well, but it's been 4 months since we did a podcast, so it was like 8 months ago probably we fessed up. But we actually didn't pull it right away. It was there. No. It could have come up. But we needed a grand finale. The way it went out is that we went through, because there aren't, when you have 32 seasons, and what did we figure out? Like 9 of them are only winning seasons. I'm surprised we had gone through. We had done every playoff season and every winning season, I want to say, and there are like 8 seasons to go, and one of them was 84. And then we decided, let's just pull this aside and save it for later. It made sense. It was kind of it was pretty obvious at that point, but it did avoid the wheel. If it had fallen on 1984, the fourth week we did it, we would have done this way back, 2 years ago? Yeah. It could have been our first one. But I think this was our destiny. But we did not manipulate the wheel at all until it got down to about the last 10. So 1984, I was 11 during this baseball season. You were 12, probably, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're 13 months apart. I was... Let's see, I was coming off of an all-star Little League season, I think, when I was 10. I think it was my first year as an all-star. And I think this was the year that I basically wore my baseball jersey all the time. I had it on. Mom would have to rip it off me to wash it once in a while. I was always, at least from the waist up, I was always in uniform, ready to go. If a game broke out. I would sometimes try. It would be hard, but to sleep through the night with a ball cap on. And then, my brother's friend would warn me that I'm going to be bald if I wear my hat all the time. So, same. Well, it worked. Damn it. He was right. I'm still wearing a hat. The other thing that happened that year was the Rockford Public Library, which I forget why we could go there, as I'm sure we didn't pay, because we didn't live in Rockford, but they must have had some reciprocal agreement. They had a thing where, for every 5 books that you read as a kid, you got a voucher for a ticket to a Cub game. And I plowed through lots of books that year, many of which I actually read. And they would bust you down and everything, right? No, this was just a ticket. So okay. I had to read enough to get 2, so that Dad could have a chaperone to bring me in from Durand. 2 hours away. Not taking a Vandergelder 11-year-old Andy Dolan. Yeah, they couldn't Uber to it. That wasn't a thing in 1984. Dad and I tried to figure it out one time. We think we went to 7 games for free that year. In 84. And I do know that we never saw him lose. The Cubs won every game we went to, whether it was 5 or 7, however many we went to. Because it's funny, the inflation on these things. Oh, I think we went to 7 games. You look back. Oh, we actually went to 2. No, we went to multiples, and we know they won them all because Dad was worried the last couple. They haven't lost since we've been there. Either we're good luck or we're about to doom them. Right, and you can't afford them to lose when they're actually in a pennant race, so you don't want to bear that burden. I don't remember when. I would say August was probably the last we went. I think it kind of ended, and then the Cubs were like, "Hey, we're actually selling tickets this year, so stop it." Right. Sorry, we say 5 books? We meant 50. They sold 2.1 million tickets in 1984.
They set a record. Yes, they did. First time they went over 2 million.
600,000 more than the year before. So coming off the 83 season, they're like giving any library that'll give out tickets. How many do you want? Hey, what time can you get there?
Taking advantage of that all the way up until like the actual push to the. That's great. That's hilarious. I can recall clearly, and I'm going to touch upon them today. At least 5 games that I went to, which even for me, I lived closer to Chicago. It wasn't as much of a hassle, but still. It would like any which way tickets would fall into your lap. You'd say yes. I'll demonstrate later. I have a couple stories. And so I feel like I actually went to more games myself in that year than I probably did the year before. And the year it just kind of like was one of those things. I can't say I went undefeated either, but it was quite a time to be alive. And being that age where like you're talking about wearing a uniform. I'm not taking my hat off. Baseball is, you're at that age, that window, right? Like speaking for myself, I was a year older than you, but we're pretty much the same age. Things like girls, like party, like you're in that period there where it's just still really, at least for me, the only thing that mattered to the point where, again, we've all of this is on the record. 1980 was our first year that we've done this. And that's because I know for myself, that's the first year that I can pretty much clearly remember. I remember like watching opening day. And I was like hooked on this team that lost 98 fucking games, and their first year manager didn't even make it to September. And then that was followed up by a strike shortened season that was even worse, believe it or not. And
that was my first.
And that was
I loved work stoppages as a result of that season. Are they going to play the season in halves again this year? No,
the reset button. Yeah, give us false hope, right? And the point is there, right? You were going to be optimistic. Like, we got in on like the ground floor. It was worse than that. It was the end of that Wrigley era. It was like a complete bottom of the barrel franchise when you and I both got on board. And so 82, 83 also sub 500, but there was some genuine sort of a turning the ship around. You could feel it. Our parents were getting excited, and it's all the Dallas Green stuff that we've rehashed. And there was some genuine excitement in 82, and they come out in the blue pajama tops, and they get to play the Reds and be the first team to play, and Bump Wills homers on the second pitch. And Bump Wills is one of those American League guys that back then only existed on Topps trading cards, and now he's like homering in the first pitch. And we got all these veterans, and the Cubs are a big player in free agency, and Ferguson Jenkins is here, and they kind of regressed in that second year in 83, and it kind of cost Elia's job, but they were still middling. But there was a little bit of cause for optimism. But then still, going in 84, they win 9 games in spring training, and even Jim Fry would say, I'm not really sure what was going on. And but did that stop by?
Unfortunately, he said the same thing in San Diego.
6 months later. But did any of that deter a 12-year-old Huey from not only staying home from school in 6th grade on opening day, but also using our family's newfangled VHS to, record the game and block out commercials as I'm watching it? And of course, I stayed home from school in that 82 game when they beat the Reds. 83, we were on spring break. So, yeah, I'm already hooked, right? So it doesn't matter what they do. They can already drag me around by the balls because they have. And so you don't really expect anything. So yeah, staying home. Huey Lewis and the News are singing the Star Spangled Banner. I got this somewhere in a box, I swear. The game they opened in San Francisco. Stoney tells us that they hadn't opened up the season on the West Coast in '66, and they still haven't. And we're off, right? And the Cubs actually they win the opener. They win the second game. They beat ex-Cub Mike Krukow. Chuck Rainey's still in the rotation. This is not the same team that you're gonna really get into, but. It was kind of a nice first start that they went on the West Coast, which is always scary and had been scary in previous years because the Cubs were bad and the Dodgers were good, and West Coast trips were tough. They had to start the season, and they came home under 500 for the only time all season. They were 3-4. They kind of hung in there. They got swept by the Dodgers too. And the other thing I guess I should mention is, 9 victories in spring training, but the thing, and I've been sort of rehashing it lately when we knew we were going to do this, and I was kind of like going down some rabbit holes, is the midnight trade that brought in the goddamn leadoff hitter, center fielder, and then almost like the MVP himself, aside from Sandberg in left field, 2 huge positions that really did make the difference when they got Dernier and Matthews, and poor Altamirano for a washed-up Bill Campbell and somebody else. It was I don't know how Dallas Green, who had been trading with his former Philadelphia franchise for years, was able to fleece them that badly. But it moved things around. It made things interesting when the season started. It put longtime favorite Bill Buckner on the bench. It forced Keith Moreland into a platoon with Mel Hall. But as we'll see, it all sort of sorted itself out.
So, who was the opening day starter for the Cubs in 1984?
Dick Ruthven used to be one of my passwords.
The ace, Dick Ruthven. And if this doesn't scream 1980s baseball, the attendance for the opening day in Candlestick was 52,700. The attendance for Game 2 was 8,460.
And it was a night game.
So fans, if at home, if you're wondering why there's always an off day after opening day, that's the reason right there. They want an extra date so they can cram all the ticket holders into it, so they do not have to give vouchers for future games for the one sellout they might get all year.
I can still tell you without looking it up that future Cy Young Award winner for the Padres, Mark Davis, we brought his name up several times incidentally, and remember this crap, was the starter for the Giants, and he was felled by some late game home runs by Keith Moreland and Ron Say. Cubs were off.
But to answer your question about I've always, well, not always, but in recent years, I have wondered the same thing. What were the Phillies doing? Basically trading most of their 1980 World Series team to the Cubs.
And they were pennant winners in '83 too.
And all I could think of is, especially the Dernier and Matthews trade. They're like, well, we can trade him to the Cubs. It's never going to come back to hurt us. It's the Cubs. It's just like, honestly, we could probably park them there, and if we need them, we can just call Dallas and get them back.
Right. Yeah.
Next thing they know, they're on the business end of the Cubs for the entire season.
That's wonderful. That explanation makes the most. And honestly, Paul Owens, was he the GM? I think that succeeded, or he ended up having to come down to manage them, or they were defending National League champs. They had gotten, I think, swept by the Orioles or lost in 5 games, but they were coming off their second pennant in 4 years, and first without Dallas Green as their manager. And that's a great point, because what the hell is Bill Campbell going to do?
That was Jed Hoyer Sr. was the general manager of the Phillies, and he was getting ready for the next great Phillies team. So he's just like, get rid of these guys. Get them out of here. We're getting ready for the next great Phillies team, not this great Phillies team.
Yeah,
go away. But unlike Jed Jr., who learned his lesson, and he scatters the players to, individually. Don't put them all on one team. This guy, Jed Hoyer Sr., gave them all to the Cubs. Jed Jr.'s like, no. I'm not sending Rizzo and Bryant and Javi all to one place because they might come back and beat us.
Right. Exactly. That's the difference. I do love that theory because that stigma was so true.
It has
people
to
like Pete Rose and Schmidt, like nobody ever, like the Cubs were so woeful. I mean, yeah, there was the burp in '69, but like that is absolutely, the Phillies were the dominant team. Everybody was taking turns being good in that division except the Cubs. The Pirates even had won a World Series 5 years earlier.
Because I mean, this team is lousy with Phillies.
Mm-hmm.
Sandberg, Boa, Matthews, Dernier, Moreland, right?
Yep. Yeah, for Mike Krukow. That was the trade there. Dickie Knowles was still in on the '84 Cubs.
Then there's like Ruthven's an old Philly, right?
Yeah, for Willie Hernandez. See, Ruthven had been acquired the year before for the next year's American League MVP and Cy Young. How about that?
Warren Brewster.
Yes, correct. He came from the White Sox.
There's Porfy.
Yep.
Played 5 games for the '84 Cubs.
Brewster came with Trout
on their on their 25-man roster. Almost half of it is guys who played for the Phillies.
And then there are other guys like Ron. I know you always goof on Ron Say because he was old and whatever, but like for me, I talked about Bump Wills being the more abstract, two-dimensional tops guys because they only existed in trading cards. Like Ron Say was the guy that had that royalty, whatever. Yeah, he was old and whatnot, but he was when we had Ron Say that was on the team the year before, clubbing 25 homers. It just felt different.
Yeah, I think Say finished in '84. Yeah, I think he finished 4th in homers and 5th in RBIs in the National League.
Okay,
he batted 7th.
No, yes, except against lefties, he would bat cleanup. I remember how it would work. He was down in the order. Interesting thing, 6 Cubs had at least 80 RBIs that year. Nobody had 100. 3 had 90. 3 were in the 90s. 3 were in the 80s. I mean, they just put it together, as we'll see. They didn't really, but patching those holes in center. I guess going into the season, if they don't make that trade, I can't even remember who their center fielder would be. Would it have been Durham and Buckner's at first? Durham was a 2-time All-Stars and outfielder. He played some center, some right. Mel Hall maybe could have been it. They had enough pieces to start, but then Dernier not only gave him a center fielder, but a leadoff hitter, and then Matthews. It's just incredible.
Could have been Henry
as we'll see. Yeah. Well, we'll get to Henry, the series in Philly in August. When he was called upon, he stepped up. But after that, go ahead.
So the 84 Cubs, remember there's only 12 teams in the National League at this time, but the 84 Cubs, first in runs, third in doubles, third in triples, second in homers, fourth in stolen bases.
Okay.
This is a very uncut thing. First in walks.
Oh, okay. Wow.
That was a well-rounded.
Very veteran.
They led the league in wins because they had the best record in the National
96.
League. Second in saves. First in. And how about this? So the Cubs, the 84 Cubs, drew the most walks, allowed the fewest.
Issued the fewest, huh?
There you go, kids. That's how you build it. That's how you. That still works today. As the 2016 Cubs will tell you, it also works.
So they come home from the West Coast road trip alive, and their home opener's on Friday the 13th. And I remember I come home from school, 6th grade, because I didn't stay home for all the openers, just opening day. And I walk in the door, and I see the starting pitcher for the Mets that day. The Mets were like the contrast that comes. They're a very young team. And I see the pitcher walking off the mound having gotten shellacked. Pretty impressive-looking African-American name. What's his real name? Dwight. I forget his middle name. Dwight Gooden. First I ever saw him getting his ears pinned back by the Cubs. And he did. I rewatched this game on YouTube, and Steve Trout, conversely, got about 15 worm burners. But I only bring this up because the next time, and we'll get to it not right away, but the next time the Cubs would face Gooden, he had a chip on his shoulder. Because apparently he didn't like how the Cubs had, kept maybe stealing a base or two. I don't think. When I looked at the video, they just kept hitting the shit out of him.
Yeah, well, the Cubs hit 4 homers in the game. But how many do you think they hit off of Dwight?
Not that many. Tidrow gave up one to Say.
They gave up
Tidrow
none.
came back.
Say
right.
hit.
Actually, there were a lot of cheap hits on Gooden, but still.
Yeah. Say it went off Ed Lynch.
Ed Lynch came in the game.
Yep. Jody hit one. Gary Matthews. Oh, sorry, just 3. Just 3. But that was Jody's was off Craig Swan, and Sarge was off Tidrow.
Yeah, he was kind of dinked and dunked, whatever. He had good stuff. I mean, Harry and Steve were talking about it. It was opening day. It was a festive atmosphere. You get a little Milo. You get a little, Bob Collins stopping by the booth and, all that stuff.
Hey, I'm going to go fly my plane over a hospital.
I was gonna. But Harry was in rare form, or into it. Harry was in rare form. Trout gave basically a precursor to how he would do this year. It would be a career year for Rainbow.
Complete game.
Complete game shutout. The only blemish was a homer to George Foster, who went Oppo, who is still playing for the Mets. George Foster still on the Mets in April. Dick Tidrow, after being traded to the White Sox in that Warren Brewster trade, apparently he had to do a mustache for mustache deal. That's how the Cubs actually got Brewster, even though you're right, he was a Philly. The starting shortstop for the Mets in this game was Luis. What's the guy's Jose
Oquendo,
who broke his thumb on a play there, and Steve Stone was just clutching pearls that the Mets were losing their great young shortstop, and we would never hear from Oquendo again for the rest of the year. They had a few other where the Mets would change. Obviously, the Cubs would change. From that point, and really nothing really happens after that. The Cubs win the next day. Sunday gets rained out, which will set up some beautiful doubleheaders later. And then whatever, we're off in the season. The Cubs are off to a better start than we've ever seen already, even if they're only 6-4. And they faced the Mets again in New York, and Gooden's on the hill, and now Gooden's already becoming a sensation. When he faced the Cubs in April, he was coming off his major league debut, and I guess he had struck out like 10 Astros or something. Cubs not really pin his ears back, but they knock him out of the box, and then Gooden starts to become a thing. And so when they meet up again, he kind of, humiliates
the matchup of aces.
Is it Ruthven?
Dwight Gooden and Dick Ruthven.
The first of like 5 matchups that year. I remember being so pissed. Like, why does Ruthven have to be the guy that pitches against Gooden every time, except for the first time?
How old was Dick Ruthven? Because as a kid, I remember thinking Dick Ruthven was 50 years old. He was.
He looked old.
33.
He was paunchy. He's our opening day starter.
33 years old, age for it.
And then I even put in that link there, but I found an article, a UPAI article, that after the game, Gooden's got some quotes. He was motivated for the Cubs. He cried that they had the game won earlier in the month and they were running and stuff. He said they were hot dogging in the game. So, I got a little bit of flavor here. It's May. And again, you and me have never seen the Cubs even this competent in May. So we're going to follow this team anyway. So it's kind of, we're soaking all of this in at this point. And that's, leave that there. They don't actually play the Mets again until a lot of other stuff happens. So we'll come back to that. But that's setting the stage there. Cubs and Mets both get off to good starts, face each other in April, face each other in May. And then that's kind of where we're at. I pointed out a game in May that I just remember watching, Game of the Week, where Jody hit a 460-foot homer to straightaway center off of Frank DiPino to steal a game against the Astros in the top of the 9th inning. And I remember thinking, the Astros was always a house of horrors, mostly because the Cubs were bad. But it was weird. It was indoors. It was loud. And so always bad things always seem to happen. So I remember thinking, Jody, one of my guys, one of my favorite players, along with Leon Durham and Keith Moreland. Just a huge clutch homer in a cavern of a ballpark. That was an otherwise insignificant game in May, but Cubs would win games like that, and they didn't win games like that before because they weren't that good. So
that was
noted.
Jody's homer was a full count, 2-out, 3-run homer to turn a sure thing against of Joni Crow. A sure thing 3-2 Astro win into a 5-3 Cub lead. And how about for Frank DiPino? Joe had started the inning. He got run after Say walked with 1 out, and then they brought Frank DiPino in. But how about how this inning ends? So they hit the home run, they go up, and then Bobby Dernier singles. Dave Smith, future Cub star, Dave Smith comes in, and this is when you're reading it on Baseball Reference. So Bob's on first. Ryan Sandberg singles. Dernier out at home. Right field to third base to catcher to third base.
Right field, third base, catcher. Okay. Yeah, I got hung up.
I don't know how Bob all of a sudden was rounding third, but he got hung up and he got out. Or maybe he was in a rundown right away and it almost scored.
That's okay. Lee Arthur was on to put it out.
He gave up a run. Things got nervy. He gave up a 1-out double. Jose Cruz drove in Craig Reynolds to pull it within. Jose stole second. Then Jerry Mumphrey struck out, future Cub Jerry Mumphrey. And then Enos Cabell flew out to right.
Remember all of those guys. And Jose Cruz, of course, was for years known as the most underrated player in the game until, at some point, it's you can't keep calling him that because he's not underrated.
He had that weird stance, too, which I just never liked.
While the first 2 months are unfolding and the Cubs actually look like they might not suck for the first time in a while, I mentioned Bill Buckner not in the opening day lineup. And that was an interesting thing, too, about the Dwight Gooden home opener at Wrigley was that Buckner got the biggest ovation and Durham was pressing early in the season and he was getting booed, our guy, Bull. He struck out the first 3 times and then he knocked a triple off the wall later on in that game. But, that'd be fine. But it was a strange situation because Buckner was, borderline Hall of Fame player. He was a, National League batting champion for the Cubs. He was one of everyone's, probably just about every Cub fan's favorite player. and he wasn't washed up. He would go on to have at least one 200-hit season with Boston, but they just Dallas Green was moving on. And then the other thing that was going on here is the platoon in right field between Keith Moreland and Mel Hall. At one point, I don't know if you could find it, but Mel Hall had popped off to reporters about not being happy about being in a platoon. That would take care of itself a little bit later. But as for Buckner, the rumors were swirling. We knew he was gone. It was kind of weird. He would play in some games. He actually got a hit off of Gooden when Gooden got his revenge against the Mets, I noticed. And then finally, after some rumors, I remember hearing Dennis Eckersley, another one of those mythical American League players, he had thrown a no-hitter once and also won 20 games. Kind of been a little up and down, and that was ultimately how it shook out by the end of May at Buckner after, 7 years as our first baseman was gone. And now we got some pitchers. This is the team that Dick Ruthven and Chuck Rainey pitching the first two games. So even though we had Sanderson and Trout, that's a need that had to be addressed.
So are we sure that the trade was for Eckersley? Sure it wasn't Buckner for Mike Brumley with Eckersley just thrown in?
Yeah, I'm going to say
key part of that trade was.
I believe we referenced the summer of '87 when Mike Brumley got his chance alongside Paul Noce in the summer of Sean Dunston and Ryan Sandberg both being out. The results were not good.
How about this? Eck is old enough that when he was traded to the Red Sox,
Cleveland.
Yep, from Cleveland. One of the guys traded with him was Jason Kendall's dad, Fred.
No shit. Really?
Yep. How old
was that trade necessitated at all by Cleveland Indians outfielder Rick Manning's behavior, or was that all? I don't know.
Well, I'm sure it bothered Dennis more then than it does now, where we talked about this, where he just freely talked about it on the broadcast.
He's cool.
There's my good buddy Rick Manning. He's still married to my ex-wife.
Bill Lee wrote about it from the Red Sox angle when he was teammates with Eckersley, and then he had to face Manning and how much Lee admired Eckersley for not drilling him. So it took every ounce of strength that he probably had. So Eckersley's debut occurs on a Sunday. I think it was Memorial Day weekend. I remember I slept over at my buddy Kevin O'Hea's house. They were Sox fans. We were watching the game the next day. I'm stoked. Here's Eck. Here's the guy we've seen before with the handlebar mustache or whatever. But this game is going to be remembered for about a 40-minute delay that occurred after Ron Say had hit a controversial 3-run homer near the left field foul pole off of noted red ass Mario Soto. And the full game is on YouTube. So Andy, be sure to drop that for any of the people that don't know how to Google Cubs Reds May 1984, May 27th to be exact. So I like to point out this game. I remember watching. I couldn't believe it was 40 minutes. Like watching it as a kid, you remember the fracas and but it's like it was so ridiculous. Like the umpires had lost total control. It was not a home run, but I forget who the third baseman were, call it a home run, and then they overturned it. And Jim Fry was indignant, but Don Zimmer in his cartoonish best was completely unhinged. And at one point, I think what happened was Mario Soto was a great pitcher. I think eventually had arm trouble. He was a really good pitcher for 4 or 5 years. One of the top pitchers in the National League. And I think what was going on is that, and you watch the video, I forget, it's like hour 20 where this happens. I think Soto was just annoyed because he was pitching in the delay, he was going to, freeze up a little bit. So at one point, you think they're going to resume and then something else happens and this and that. And like benches were kind of clearing. It was just all this craziness. But Zimmer at one point was arguing with the umpire, and then Soto, you couldn't really capture. Like you just hear Harry go, whoa! Like, not really able to describe it. And there was no live camera caught it. And they would Arnie would show a replay. It was a weird angle and kind of blurry. But it seemed like Soto just wanted to kick the shit out of Don Zimmer because that old man is just wasting everybody's time causing a scene out there. And the catcher, and I don't know if it was Dan Billardello or what, was trying to stop Soto. And then it looked like they were tag teaming to trip to knock Zimmer down, which is exactly what happened.
It was Brad
and I remember
Golden.
Okay, that's who it is.
But Dan Billardello did play in the game, but he didn't.
And I remember hearing word on the street was that people at the park said that Zimmer swallowed his chew and ended up zooking on the grass too. But what happened was Zimmer had to be tended to, like he got knocked over. He's an old man and stuff. And then, flash forward 19 years, I'm in my living room and I'm watching the American League Championship Series, and I see Pedro Martinez storm towards a much older Don Zimmer and throw him to the turf by his helmet-plated head. And I'm thinking, I don't know what it is. Is it the steel helmet that somehow just incites certain Latin pitchers to just attack Don Zimmer? But whatever it is, it happened in 1984 with Mario Soto before it happened with Pedro. But that was Dennis Eckersley's debut.
So with the 40-minute delay, is that why Soto only pitched 1 inning?
Yeah, I think he was just gotten cold.
So he had a Don Zimmer swallowed his chew delay, and that drove Mario out of the game. Bob Ochinko came in and pitched 4 per scoreless.
Did he not get ejected then? Maybe I don't know if he got
thrown
ejected
out.
for attacking.
He pitched a full inning.
Well,
I think maybe there was nobody off the field.
Yeah, well, you said Say batted 7th, so he probably had 1, 2, 3 in the first.
Oh, so that was probably the end. It ended up being the end of the first.
It was a 3-run homer. Well, I think when the game resumed, it was Say was still batting, and it was probably another pitcher.
This is quite a line for Eckersley. Eckersley pitched a complete game. 9 innings,
lost.
Gave up 9 hits, 4 runs, struck out 3, walked 1.
He pitched well.
Scattered 9 hits.
He would win 10 games. So that was trade number 1. And then trade number 2, I don't know exactly when it was, but it was a few weeks later, and that was a much bigger trade for another pitcher and more players. And, in retrospect, obviously paid off even more. So,
yeah, I'm not familiar with that trade. Did the guy ever go on to do anything for the Cubs? This fat guy from Cleveland that they traded for?
Who, Mel Hall?
So that trade was, I should probably look this up. Was that trade in May still?
June.
The
deadline back
was June 15th?
June 15th,
yeah,
yes.
Bad. And then, so they make the trade. It's...
I'm going to get the date on it because in June things started getting interesting. Because that's the thing. Yeah, you got Eckersley. All of a sudden this team's pretty good, and Buckner's a trade chip, and Eckersley has a good first outing, though he doesn't win. And then it was... What was the trade here? Hold on. Yeah, it couldn't have been after June 15th. And I can still tell you, even it was June 13th.
All right, so it was right before the deadline. Mm-hmm. And that ended up being a problem, right? Because they didn't... Dallas didn't get Mel, or maybe it was Joe. One of the two, or maybe
Mel and... Yeah.
Didn't get them cleared through waivers, right? And
Which is the same mistake that Dallas was a little sloppy. We give him his due, and he was pretty iconic. But
he wasn't big on paperwork. He's a big.
Well, in the off season going into the '83 season, this actually worked out because we got Steve Trout, but he didn't protect Fergie Jenkins, and it was a mistake. Or he was trying to sneak him. I don't know what it was. And the White Sox supposedly made overtures. Imagine that, like 38-year-old Fergie Jenkins. But Fergie was decent in '82, and he would be the opening day starter in '83. So, like, supposedly this Cubs Sox trade that was made was basically the Sox had green over a barrel. That's where we had to give up such greats like Pat Tabler and Scott Fletcher and Dick Tidrow. But we got Warren Brewster and Steve Trout. But yeah, supposedly Green was forced into that trade because he had left Fergie unprotected. And then this trade was announced, and then all of a sudden, whoa, you didn't put Mel Hall and Joe Carter through waivers, so it's not official yet. So that means Sutcliffe wouldn't make his start for 10 days or 11 days.
And it held it up, and it screwed up the rotation. And Sutcliffe tells a great story about they go to the Phillies come in and sweep the Cubs in 4 games. And it's like they lose 11-2, 5-2, 8-2, and 9-7. They're pitching like shit. And so Billy Connors calls a meeting for the pitchers. And he's got them all in the clubhouse. He's just chewing every one of the pitchers up and down one side or the other. And Sutcliffe is sitting in the back like, well, at least I haven't been pitched. He can't get mad at me. And he gets about halfway through the ring. He turns and he sees Sutcliffe, and he goes, and when the fuck are you going to do something? And Rick's like, well, I can't.
And you know what? I don't remember the 4-game sweep, but that tracks. And I'm just going to say that I wanted to bring up one game that I was at because we talked about the randomness of going to games, and so this is my first one, June 14th, and Steve Carlton was pitching. So let's face it, like we grew up, we'd see Nolan Ryan on TV, Tom Seaver, but like the odds are you're probably not going to see those guys in person when you're a kid, right? Because they're pitchers, it has to fall right, and so I never saw any of those other guys. It just so happened that on the day we decided to go, Steve Carlton. So that's fact number one. But the others I remember going to this game is that I went with my brother, took my mom's car, which was like a 1974 Volkswagen Beetle.
You took your mom's car?
I was 12. But my brother was 9. My brother, I didn't know how to drive.
You're sitting on a phone booth, your brother's running the pedals with his hands.
And the clutch.
Yeah.
He was 19, and then it'd be one or two of his friends. I think my sister went. It was the 80s. There might have been 9 of us piled into this Beetle. It was a different time. It was my mom's car. It was a little bit beat up. We weren't exactly rolling in it, and getting by here, 1984. Thrilled to be going to a Cubs game. We're driving down, and from the northwest suburbs, from Elk Grove, the other side of O'Hare. And once we get east of O'Hare on the Kennedy, the car starts sputtering and whatnot. So we got to get off. So we're near enough to the Cumberland stop that we're able to get the car into a location and then take the L. So
parked it on the tracks and hopped on the train.
That's right. Just we'll have to come up with a story to tell Mom a little bit later. So we get down there and we get down to the game. We're sitting in the bleachers because whenever we'd go as a group, it's the easiest, simplest, cheapest way to go. So one of the things I remember, number one, Steve Carlton's pitching, and I mainly remember this because of this douchebag in the front row that had his kid with him at the game that wouldn't shut the hell up about, my old man took me to a game when Jim Maloney no-hit the Cubs. And Carlton went like 5 no-hit innings in this game, right? And so I've listened to this Cubs fan that's basically hoping to get a Steve Carlton no-hitter. And then who breaks it up, of course, but long-time Steve Carlton nemesis and itinerant 5th or 6th Cubs outfielder Gary Woods, who truly does have the most remarkable career statistics against Steve Carlton. I don't have the baseball reference access, the exclusivership to do those filters, but I did look it up and it's ridiculous. Gary Woods did break up Steve Carlton's no-hitter, up yours lefty in the 6th inning. Cubs did lose because you said that was the first of a 4-game sweep, and the Sutcliffe trade happened 2 days later. But here's the part where I have to share this story. Game's over. We take the L back to Cumberland. We probably took the 152 Addison bus up to the Addison train station, take the L back. Not sure what, but my dad was going to help us get home. He worked over by the United Center, the Teamsters building over there on the west side. He drove to work. So he may have actually picked us up from Wrigley Field. I can't remember. He probably did that. He probably shot over after work, picks us up from the park. We drive out towards Cumberland Avenue, and the car is dead. We're not getting this thing home. So to get home, it's only about 9 miles, but there's Touhy Avenue, and it's rush hour. Basically, 4 of us sat in the Beetle. My brother kept the car in neutral, and we rolled it out into the street, and my dad in his car proceeded to just push us.
Oh, Jesus.
All the way home at the end of this day in which we saw Steve Carlton. We made it. Now, it's kind of a tricky thing, right? You're coming up on an intersection all right, I'm going to brake. Yeah. Don't ram into me. And then, all right, now it's green. You got to sort of nudge me and start pushing me into the intersection. And so we made it home safely. Eventually the Beetle got fixed. But yeah, so unlike you, not every Cubs game I went to in 1984 did I see the Cubs win because they lost that day.
Yeah, so before that series, they had, so on the day they traded for Sutcliffe on the 13th of June, they beat the Expos 7-4, and they had a 1.5 game lead in the National League East.
In June.
And then they lost 4 in a row to the Phillies, and they were 2 games back.
June swoon.
Oh, no. They beat
They
beat the Pirates, but then they lost 2 more in a row, so they lost 6 out of 7. And the Cardinals are coming to town, and oh, shit. And what did the Cubs do? I got to talk about the Friday game first. Sorry. We both have Sandberg stories. Real quick, because for years I could not realize that this was the day, because for some reason I didn't think that I played baseball games on Friday, and I thought I was looking for a weeknight game. I just remember for some odd reason that Mark Salas was in this game because I thought that was a funny name, and he was, but I couldn't find it, thinking I was looking for a Wednesday and Tuesday until it dawned on me. No, sometimes we do play games, and the reason I bring this up is, again,
I'm 12 years old. How am I getting to games? My parents work. The Cubs don't have night games, right? On this day, my other sister that wasn't with me at the Phillies game, she tells me that she's going to the Cubs game with her friends. Their mom's driving. My sister's 15. And I don't know if they had an extra ticket or they just invited me. But, of course, you're a kid. It's like everything goes out the window, including the fact that I had a game. But just to point it out, like, I loved playing baseball as much as I loved watching the Cubs. So it was just completely like my mind just brain farted. What? Cubs game? Let's go. This was early in the 3:00 days of Dallas Green, I believe. I think Friday games. I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure it was a 3:00 game. And I was oblivious to the fact that I had a game. And we're in the upper deck. We're not in the bleachers. I'm sitting with my sister and her friends and their mom, nice enough to take me. I'm enjoying the game. I'm keeping score. I'm eating some nachos. I'm talking to my sister. She's asking how my baseball season's going. I'm pretty good. She's like, when's your next game? Oh, shit. No, I'm sitting all the way in Wrigley Field. It's like 5:00. Like, you have a game tonight. And so I'm like, yeah, and I'm freaking out. My dad's a manager. He's going to kill him. Like, he's gonna what is wrong with that moron? What is he doing going to a Cubs game? And we left early, and I think they were ready to go. So it wasn't like I was completely being a pain in the ass. And I just remember we didn't even take the interstate. We didn't take the Kennedy. We're, again, crawling down like Oakton or Toohey. I'm just like clenching. And I did make it to the game like by the third inning, but I just but again, it kind of speaks to the fact that, hey, anyway, someone asked if I can go to a Cubs game. I'm 12 years old. You know, what do I have going on? It's more important. But Cubs did win that game, and in retrospect, that was a big game.
Yeah. So the next day, I'm always amazed when we tell this story that we left for vacation on a Saturday. Like a farmer and a school teacher needed to wait till Saturday to go on vacation.
In June.
In June. Yeah, it's not like mom was working. We got to wait for your mother to finish. But we are on our way to... We were going to Washington, D.C. That was the big trip. We were going to hit Gettysburg on the way out.
The big D.C. trip.
And then come back around and go through Ohio just so we could go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, we were... And my brother and my sister, who were both... One's 9 years older than me, one's 8, were, they were older. They weren't going on family vacation, so it was just going to be me and mom and dad. And on our way, Dad's got to go around Chicago. And he's apparently got a little Cub fever. So we decided we're going to go through Chicago. And we end up...
getting off at Addison and driving down to the lake?
We end up at the McDonald's across from the park. No, we went. Dad just assumed because this was the Cubs. We're just gonna go get tickets. We're just gonna go up and we're just gonna walk up and buy them. It's Cubs. Well, you can't buy even in June of 1984. You couldn't buy Cardinal tickets at the
just bleachers.
So, and we didn't get there early enough. I'm sure it was Mom's fault.
Mm-hmm. Like she would have loved to have.
So they offered, but they did have standing room only tickets. We could have had standing room only. And Dad could tell from the I was up for it. It didn't matter. You could have told me that I had to stand on top of the scoreboard. I would have been up there. I wouldn't care. Yeah. Mom was not all that enthused about standing for God knows how long for the Cubs when we were supposed to be on our way. So he tried to talk her into it, decided it wasn't going to happen, and we hopped in the car and we started heading east. And early on in the game, we realized we had made a great decision. And I've always wondered what would have happened if we had gone, because the Cubs were down 7-1 in the second inning, and I just have a feeling that they would have been like, all right, fuck this, we gotta go. Mm-hmm. So that would have been worse.
We only paid for standing room. Yeah, it's only $5.
Actually bought the tickets, gone in, and then bailed. During one.
This was a mistake.
It was bad enough that we were standing in front of the stadium with a chance to buy tickets and we didn't go in. It would have been worse if we had bought them, went in, and then after 2 innings said, all right, we got to start. We got to drive through Indiana and Ohio today. So we hop in the car, and we're listening to the game. And I remember I was scoring the game in the car.
I used to do that sometimes, watch it on TV.
And I gave up. It's probably when it was 7-1. I was like, fuck this. I'm running out. The Cardinals are screwing up my columns, and I'm like, all right, I'm done. And as the comeback is started, we're getting more and more excited. And we're getting to the Cardinals have a 1-run lead, and Suter's coming in the 9th, and the signal is fading. And we figure, well, we're probably just going to hear 1-2-3, Cubs lose. And instead we hear the first Sandberg home run, and we go nuts in the car. But now we got to get through 2 more innings in 1984 with a Chrysler New Yorker antenna trying to haul.
Well, GN always has had a strong signal, though. I've picked it up out in Carolina at night.
And it would go in and it would go out, and then, but at least in my recollection, it came back. I know we heard the homer in the 10th to tie it, and I'm fairly sure.
No, it was the 9th and 10th.
9th and 10th. He hits a homer in the 9th to tie it. Has to hit another homer in the 10th to tie it.
Yeah.
And then the great Dave Owen wins it in the 11th. Because really, it's the Dave Owen game. It's not the Ryan Sandberg
game. It is.
Sandberg didn't win the game. He just tied it twice.
So I did not come as close to coming to that game. I had an opportunity almost to meet with Bill Murray because I was at a dinner when he got inducted into the Irish American Heritage Center, and my sister-in-law was kind enough to purchase a table. And if you haven't been to the Irish American Heritage Center on the Northwest Side, you're missing out. You can also YouTube or Google a Conan O'Brien bit that he does from there. It's an old school that has been turned into a bastion of just Irish culture, which is mostly revolves around drinking. There's bars on every floor and whatnot.
Drinking and dead potatoes.
That's correct. And the year that Bill Murray was honored as one of the annual Hall of Fame inductees to the Irish American Center, he visited, and all the Murray brothers were there. And I remember I was in a room upstairs in the ballroom, knocking back a few beers, and I'm like, at first I'm like, I don't want to bother Bill. I'm like, wait, even though I didn't pay, I'm too cheap, but like, we're here, we paid to be here. Let's go. I got to go shake Bill Murray's hand, but I kind of waited too long. So I finally get in line, and the line's crawling, and I've got the story in my mind that I'm going to tell here that I was going to tell Bill Murray. Here's the thing. There were 2 very young, very attractive women in front of me, and this line was going on a long way, and I'd had a few beers, and I might have been maybe tilting a little bit. And by the time I would get all of the front, and then these 2 young ladies go up, and Bill's very happy to see them, and his handler kind of looks at me, looks at them. He's like, that's probably a good place to draw the line. Because I knew the line was going to get cut off at some point because it had been there. So I did not actually get my chance, and I probably would have flubbed it anyway. What I would have told him was that on June 23rd, 1984, first of all, my dad got tickets at the last. My brother came running in the door. My brother, I guess, would have been like 21 years old, 21. He was at Northern. He was going to Northern, but he was home that summer. My dad was cutting the grass. My brother comes bursting. He's like, I got 2 Cubs tickets. You want to go? Sure. So my dad put his shirt on because men cut grass shirtless in the through the 80s, and they went off to the Cubs game. So that was pretty cool that I knew 2 people that ended up going to that game. Me, I was fine, just hanging out, going to watch it on NBC, and same thing. They go down 7-1, and I get a phone call from my buddy Mike down the street. Wants to know if I want to go see Ghostbusters. Laying over, my dad will give us a ride over to Woodfield. I'm like, fuck this. The Cubs are down 7-1. I'm wasting my. Let's go. And so we go see Bill Murray's Ghostbusters, epic movie. I mean, let's face it, right? We're talking 1984. Like, there is a certain soundtrack, and obviously the Ghostbusters themes is one of them. Remember Cubs Busters? That was big. Yeah, but I see, Rick Moranis and Bill Murray and the whole gang, and get picked up, and I don't know what's going on, right? I don't even care about the Cubs, but I still want to know, how do you find out what happened in the Cubs game in 1984? Unless your parents might get mad.
Don't you go to the town square and someone has a big board up and they're moving the guys around the bases one at a time and recreating it?
I could not wait for the 15 minutes after or before the hour, the WBBM newscast. No, I call 976-1313.
George Osmond told you what happened.
And you know what they told me what happened? This is a true story. Cubs win 13-12 on Dave Owens' RBI single. Because, Sports Phone's just going to do the cap, right? So even though I'm like, wow, they came back and Dave Owen won. And then I had no idea about Sandberg's heroics till like that night. And then, it kind of grew into a legend, obviously. But like my whole take was that, I leave the Cubs down 7-1, then win 13-12 thanks to Dave Owen. So it is the Dave Owen game.
Well, and it's funny. Now, had you been a fan of, like a really big fan of a team other than the Cubs?
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
If your football team had one option in their playbook, the results probably wouldn't be great. The same could be said for your investments. SIBO index options like SPX and XSP can help expand your investing strategies with cash settlement and potential tax advantages. If you're ready for a more dynamic game plan, head to betterwithoptions.com. SIBO, life is better with options. Your investments could be too. There are risks associated with SIBO company products. Review the disclosures and disclaimers at SIBO.com/US_disclaimers.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
And your favorite team was on Saturday baseball on NBC, you probably wouldn't have left. You probably would have stayed and watched it because it would have been that rare. It was still cool whenever the Cubs were on, like the game of the week. That was cool. But we were spoiled because we could see every game.
Game was on Channel 9 anyway. Yep. Yeah. And that was, again, no lights. So, like, what are you doing in the summer at 12? You don't have a job. And, like, I didn't watch every game. I would play pickup games and go swimming. But the Cubs are invariably on. You watch a few innings. Like, they're always on when they're at home during the day. And we watch more Cubs games than other kids would watch their team. Well, in the summer, you could actually watch it more. So, I take it for granted. Like, I don't need to stick around for this. And that's the other thing, too. If you're a fan in another city and you're not even seeing the game, you don't have a sports phone, they're not going to tell you.
Little did you know,
they're going to tell your local stores.
When you were in your 40s, the Cubs would found an entire network that would show that game over and over and over again. And you feel like you never missed it because you've seen it.
It was Bruce Sutter, former Cubs Cy Young Award winner, I'm glad you put it in the context of that losing streak, because then the next day something iconic happened. The next day, you know what that was? So Friday's the day that Huey forgot he had a baseball game. The Cubs win. Sandberg game on Saturday. Sunday is actually Rick Sutcliffe's Cubs debut.
Oh yeah,
home debut. He debuted in Pittsburgh for that only victory. So what you're talking about was the 4 losses in a row to Philly. Sutcliffe shows up, frickin' stops it. He did that all season, by the way, I noticed. And then they lose the last 2 games to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh sucked, by the way, but they're the only team to have a winning record against the Cubs. And then the Cubs bounce off the mat with sweeping St. Louis, punctuated by Sutcliffe in his home debut, throwing a fucking shutout. How's that?
Yeah, threw a 5-hitter. Shut out the Cardinals, who made 3 errors.
Well, and the Cardinals were just 2 years removed from a World Series themselves, so they got their comeuppance.
Yeah, so Sutcliffe, 9 innings, 5 hits, 1 walk, 14 strikeouts. So
awesome.
Shoved it up the Cardinals.
Just wanted to cover one more game.
That Cardinal lineup he faced had 2 future managers in it.
Oh? Is Jose Oquendo? He been traded? No,
he's never been
a manager. Has he?
Art Howe and Mike Jorgensen.
Oh, very good. Before the Cubs went to the West Coast for the second time in another challenging trip that they would survive, there was one more game or games that I got to go to. It's, again, crazy. 12-year-old, no car, no access otherwise. But you talked about the Rockford Library. Well, the Elk Grove Park District would have like the one game a year that you could go to. They would bus us down, right? So I'd have to get a parent to take me. And the beautiful thing about it was the game in question would take place on Tuesday, June 26th. And because what had to have been an early season rainout, I actually got to go to my
April
first
22nd.
real doubleheader. And it's hilarious to think about because I think nowadays, like the park district would be like, whoa, we're not taking your kid for 10 hours.
Yeah.
We're going to one. First of all, you don't have traditional doubleheaders.
Right. Cubs wouldn't have let you go to both games. I mean, even if they had.
Unless
they weren't going to.
But I think if they had, I think local would be like, I think it's just funny that me and a bunch of other, like anywhere from like 10 to 15-year-old kids got on the bus. There was a 20-year-old like chaperone because she knew my brother and she was pretty cool. I was kind of hanging out with her. And so, yeah, there were adults, but it was like, they bus us down and we were just basically at Wrigley Field for 7 hours. But bringing it back to the Pirates, they sucked. They had a first baseman named Jason Thompson, he was a former Tiger. He was like this 220 hitter that could hit 30 homers, and he was an absolute Cub killer for a brief period of time. The Cubs could not beat the Pirates. And I said this in passing earlier. It would prove out to be true that they were the only team in the National League that had a winning record against the Cubs, and they themselves were in last place of no consequence, sucked against everybody else. They were a pain in the Cubs' ass. And even that doubleheader, the Cubs came back to win the second one. They had to fight really hard, but they got embarrassed by the same score as a forfeited game in the first one, 9-0. And then they would win. They would draw a split in this 4-game series thanks to the walk-off when Chuck Tanner brought in 6 infielders, and I think Durham got a big hit off of Al Holland. But the Cubs are kind of sputtering a little bit. You can see a lot of L's there, right? That June swoon, but Sutcliffe has now won 2 starts. They got to go on the West Coast, and that was when Sutcliffe would actually have his only loss to a young Oral Hershiser. And they'd always talk about like the drama and the emotions that Sutcliffe had because Tommy Lasorda, prick that he was, it was pretty well known that Lasorda really stuck it to Sutcliffe in the 81 Dodger World Championship team. Sutcliffe would have been the Rookie of the Year in 1979, was left off of the 81 playoff roster, and Sutcliffe supposedly turned Lasorda's office upside down. Again, I don't think anyone in America can fault him for doing that. And he struggled both times against the Dodgers. When they came back to Chicago, the Cubs bailed him out. I don't think he got a decision. But and then after that, Sutcliffe was like he was against the Cardinals the day after the Sandberg game. And they held their own on that.
The Cubs had been, before they started that, they got that 4-game sweep against the Phillies. They were... they were 9 over. They were 9 over. And they had that rough patch that went all the way until basically the end of June. But they were 6th. Well, they won the last. No, they won 1 game. Anyway, they were still tied for first on the
at the end of June.
So
okay.
Everybody else must have struggled at the same time.
Yep. Yeah, there was first, second, third, and if memory serves, I'm pretty sure it was Cubs, Phillies, Mets. The Expos were not a bad team. But it was Cubs, Phillies,
the only bad
Mets.
team in the division was the Pirates. That was easily the best division in baseball.
And all the money would have been on the Phillies, actually, even though they gave away to the Cubs their left fielder and center fielder. The Mets were young, and the Cubs were the Cubs, and the Phillies, were the premier team. So yeah, they had a 2-week run facing all these West Coast teams, but they held their, they survived the one out west. They actually strung a little 4-game winning streak in there, and then they battled at home, and they're second place, first place. They're getting through July, and then finally we go back to New York after almost 2 whole months. Friday night, Shea Stadium, and I think it's fair to say
matchup everybody wanted.
Once again for the
Dick Ruthven.
For the second time of the season. And I think it's fair to say, Andy, that you and I, being 11 and 12-year-olds respectively, we're starting to get a very healthy dose and education of the whole 69 Cubs. Yep. I don't think it had really been talked about much at all. But it was a coincidence because, the DeRocher era Cubs were over 500 for several years after 69. The Mets themselves would win another pennant in, 73. But for the next 10 years, both teams were ass.
Well, and one of the things I hated about the Mets was, hopefully it was brighter there in person than it was on TV, but Shea always looked so dark. Like it just was like ugh.
murky. Yeah.
You hear the Cubs; they play in the sunshine. We have weeds growing on the wall, and it's all charming. And then there's fucking Shea with the awful, everything looks like crap, and they have that stupid rotten apple out in center field.
Yep. I agree. Airplanes flying over.
Yeah, the stupid planes. It just felt grimy and bad.
Yep. And it's Friday night, and it's but it was palpable, like for our parents, like your dad, my dad, there was like that anxiety. It was real. 69 was a psychic. There was psychic damage there for the fan base. The Mets came out of nowhere. They had, like, my dad would complain that Wally Backman reminded him of Al Weiss, who was some like slap hitting 69 Met that would like do shit. Like, so he was having flashbacks, right? And the media, of course, would really be playing. They didn't really talk much about Black Cats and Billy Goats. In fact, like, Ron Sando was nowhere to be found in 1984. Just for the record, just FYI, he kind of came out of the woodwork when the Cubs became popular again. We all knew who Ernie was, and Fergie, of course, had been back, and Billy Williams was a Hall of Famer. But we started learning about Santo in 84 because of 69 and stuff. Just the ghosts. It was only 15 years, but the ghosts were there. And then to add to the anxiety, Friday night, New York, Cubs are in rarefied air for us. We didn't physically live through 69, but now we've got this team that is legitimately in a fucking pennant race in July. Now we're, all those demons aside, here's this hot shot rookie that has been like hotter than shit since the Cubs knocked him out of the box at the home opener, who's already delivered some retribution. And it was an insane, I remember watching it. I was just like pit of my stomach, and it was a rough night. It was a close game. Ruthven, to his credit, kept the Cubs in it, but the Cubs could not hit good. And at the end of the night, they would be 4.5 games behind the Mets on July 27th. Think about that.
Yep, no good.
No good. But what happens the next day?
Dick Ruthven starts again. He girded up his loins, and he said,
"Old Mr. Magoo, Jim Fry.
I got another 6. I'm going to pitch left-handed today." Like, no.
No, not at all. What happens next is Rick Sutcliffe, our guy. Right? We finally maybe have a guy. I don't know what Sutcliffe has done up until this point. He did not get the decision. He didn't pitch poorly. The Cubs piled it on the Mets bullpen, though. I don't really remember the specifics, but Ron Darling was their number 2, and he was harder. So, they kind of get even there. And then it was the extremely satisfying Sunday doubleheader. And I just remember just luxuriating. You're talking about doubleheaders, just 6 hours of the Cubs in New York, just shoving it up the Mets hiney. Steve Trout with the shutout in the first one, and then our guy Scott Sanderson. And the Mets couldn't hit all of a sudden. The Cubs did have pitching. Look at that. Aside from Ruthven, no offense, Sutcliffe, Trout, Sanderson, and then Eckersley was on ice. Cubs take 3 or 4 from the Mets. That felt great.
Yeah,
and
after being 4.5 out on Friday night, they left a game and a half out. Two
Pretty
days
nice.
later.
Yeah, 2 days later. And then the very next series I've talked about was a very pivotal series. They went into first place against Philly. Very hard-fought series. If you look at each game, I'm pretty sure Bob Dernier did not play in any of the games. I promised our listeners Henry Cotto Day in the Sun. It would be this series. He got on base a bunch. He made some plays. The first game, I think it was a 3-2 victory. Sutcliffe held on. The second game, I remember watching it. Rich Bordy starts, pitches his ass off. He's facing 1 over the minimum, but the Cubs can only score 1 run. Poor Rich Bordy, who would eventually unfairly be left off the playoff roster. With 2 out, he's out dueling, I think, defending Cy Young Award winner John Denny. But with 2 outs in the 9th, rookie Juan Samuel homers, ties it up. Cubs lose a tough one in extra innings. And then they have to face Carlton the next day, and they fall down to Carlton. So it just feels like, shit, beat the Mets, and now we're giving up the ground. I think Sandberg had a huge homer in this game. It's on video. A lot of 84 games are on video. But the rubber match victory over the Phillies was just really like they were in first to stay. They came back on Steve Carlton after really looks like things were going to go sideways. Philly had a 3-0 lead. And, like, hey, this is not your father's Cubs. It started to sink in. There's 2 months to go. We just sort of shoved it up the Mets hiney, and we just escaped, without our center fielder and leadoff man with, winning a series. But, we got to grind ahead of us, kids.
So I pulled up the box score for this first Phillies game, and what jumped out at me is the Ryan Sandberg's slash line. So this is July 30th. On July 30th, 1984, Ryan Sandberg was hitting .333 with a .382 on base and a .564 slugging.
Wow.
And then the guy hitting 2 spots below him, Leon Durham, was hitting 301 with a 390 on base and a 518 slug. And then Larry Boa was hitting 227 with a 274 on base and a 275 slug. So for all you Nick Madrigal fans, if you ever get in a time machine and you go back, you could just go watch. If you love Nick Madrigal, you can just watch Larry Boa.
I feel like Keith Moreland was a high OBP guy. You know, Say had punch.
Nope.
Jody
well,
had
it's
punch.
not at that point. 316 from Moreland at that point.
Oh, that's too bad. I mean, I was wrong. But
remember, nobody cared. Nobody even knew about. Well, how about this? This is the Sarge. This is a weird slash line. 288, 403 on base, 403 slugging.
Wow, that's the quirk of anything, right?
Yeah. He got hot late. Like he did most of his damage in August and September.
He had the game-winning RBI in the doubleheader sweep. We'll get to it, but just to throw it out, the doubleheader sweep in September with the Cardinals, where they clinched the tie, and the game-winning RBI in Pittsburgh when they clinched. He led the National League game-winning RBIs with like 36 or something stupid, and it was also the last year that game-winning RBI was an official stat, but Gary Matthews did lead the National League in game-winning RBIs.
Well, let's look quick while we're on this subject of Gary Matthews Sr., for those of you who didn't know that Gary Matthews Jr., his dad.
Both have been discussed on many episodes.
Got off to a great start, 339, 469, 484. Slumped in May, 247. Still got on base, 370, but a 337 slug. He had 6 extra base hits in May. June, he slugged 345, 20 points lower than his on base for June. But then in July, he slugged 459. In August, he slugged 449. And in September, 5 homers and 20 RBIs, he slugged 529. So
yeah,
the lights came on and Sarge was there.
Flipping his helmet off. We should also mention, for the record, the sort of cult following that he developed, which was, the bleacher bums throughout the years would have different relationship with different fans. Like Dick Selma would get him to chant in '69 and stuff. Matthew, but like '84 was just such a bonkers year and so much fun. But they took to Matthews. One day he bought them all hats, Sarge hats, and then they started doing this. This became more popular with Andre Dawson.
That's good on the audio podcast. What you're doing there?
Like I'm actually doing my.
He's doing the salam, which I'm
the
sure
Wayne
is
and
a
Garth,
culturally insensitive
we're not
way
worthy.
to. Yes.
Yeah. Right. It started, I think, with Sarge. They had some salute. He was enjoying, and he was in the twilight of his career. He came up with
current Cub fans. No, I mean they go to games and they throw coffee beans and hair plugs at Ian Happ.
That's right.
That's not any different.
Yeah. So, but yeah, after the Philly series, they take another one from Montreal. They're winning series 2-3, and now it's the rematch with the Mets, right? And now for the third time on a Friday afternoon, here's Dwight Gooden and Dick Ruthven once again, kids, because you just 2 times is not enough. And very satisfying Friday afternoon because the Cubs got Gooden the first time, and then Gooden absolutely got them the next 2 times. But hey, let's come back to our play. This is the first time that the Cubs and Mets are playing at Wrigley in 4 months, from April to August, April, May, June, July, 4 months. The Mets do not come in. So Gooden comes back. Results are even worse. Cubs beat the shit. It is an absolute rocker. Harry's going nuts. And I said it was a Friday. It was a Monday. My mistake. I apologize. The Monday series, they're coming off the weekend after they beat the Expos. So Gooden gets bashed on Monday. You get another doubleheader sweep on Tuesday. Once against Sutcliffe. This time Sutcliffe gets the win. They come back late. So Tuesday, August 7th, second game of the doubleheader. Pretty sure that's the game in which you might see Keith Moreland gets ejected. Is that would that be it? I think that's the game that we should probably discuss. I don't know if there's video precisely of this, but Keith Moreland, of course, former Texas Longhorn football player. Let's just give it the context now. So we've already discussed how the Cubs went into New York and really sort of silenced the Mets and closed the gap. And then, teams were jockeying back and forth between first place. A week goes by, and the Cubs now get the Mets at home for some more ass whooping, and they do just that. They beat Good in the first game, they Darlin the first game of the doubleheader, and in the second game, they're just beating the shit out of Ed Lynch, future Cubs saboteur, as general manager. They are outclassing the Mets. They are beating the shit out of the Mets. I mean, just imagine how fulfilling this is for everybody that lived through 69. We're watching before our eyes the Demons just get fucking sliced left and right. And it gets to the point where dumbass Ed Lynch, although he is a tall guy, all right, I'll grant that. But, Keith Moreland was a Division I football player. Lynch does a horse shit, basically throws behind Moreland because the Cubs are just pounding everything that the Mets throw up there. And Moreland ain't going to have it. He charges the mound. And a fracas ensues. So that's exciting. Bill Robinson, Mets coach, later on gets into a fight with a fan over the dugout. It's a carnival atmosphere. After the game, we have to mention this, Andy. Evan remembers Lee Elia's rant that the late Les Grobstein recorded, but it was after this game in which Keith Moreland dropped Ed Lynch that he was asked a dumb question by Bruce Levine. And at one point he got defensive, and Bruce Levine also got defensive and proceeded to tell Mets pitcher and future Cubs GM Ed Lynch that without guys like me, a.k.a. reporters, a.k.a. Bruce Levine, without guys like me, you, the ball player, don't have a job. Kind of spinning the whole thing, which is, of course, without ball players, reporters don't have jobs. Ed Lynch was absolutely incredulous. Without me, without you, I don't have a job? Without you, I don't have a job? Like, just classic. But anyway, we'll give that one to Bruce because it made the Mets look stupid. It made Ed Lynch look, still makes Bruce look stupid. But anyway, I even around this time I remember watching just happened to catch the CBS nightly news with Dan Rather, which come out at 5:30, and there was a set piece on the Cubs. And I remember they showed Moreland. That was one of the clips. Moreland running to the mound and kicking Ed Lynch's ass. I mean, it was bonkers to see this happening before our eyes. They had now become a national sensation. They finish off the sweep of the Mets. Did they finish off a sweep? Was it a sweep or the Mets? Yeah, 4-game sweep. Yep. So they beat the Mets between Chicago and New York. 1, 2, 3, 7 out of 8 games.
Yep.
And you think that, and ever since that point, nobody ever mentioned the 69 Cubs again. Right?
No, never.
No, wait. I'm sorry.
It never came
up. That's actually come back stronger than ever. We thought that 84 would have absolutely exercised those demons. But regardless, I don't know if I've done it justice, but the pure level of just euphoria, the satisfaction out of beating the hell out of the Mets over and over again, I don't know. I could relive that the rest of my life.
Well, and it's a function of two things. The history between the two teams, but also the fact that the Mets were getting really good, and they were a threat again. They had been a laughingstock for a long time with the Cubs.
I said, 10 years, both teams were ass.
And the Cubs, it was almost one of those things where the Cubs were starting to get good, and you looked over and said, why do the fucking Mets have to get good now? It's supposed to be. Can't we just? We already have the Phillies and the Cardinals to worry about. We don't also need the fucking Mets again.
Growing up, for us, the 5 years before this in our nation, like fandom, the Cubs and Mets was always like a freaking slap fight. It was like, couldn't get out of each other's way. And then all of a sudden, they're the team that we have to get past.
Yeah.
But they did.
Yeah, and then those in the 80s, and we've talked about this before, the fact that the Cubs won 2 division championships in that loaded NL East is actually pretty impressive. The West, the Dodgers were out there dicking around with the Giants hadn't really figured it out. The Padres were good for a year.
Yep. It was pretty much all Dodgers and Astros in the early 80s. Astros were decent, but it was, Giants were ass until 87. Late 80s, Giants started turning around. But it was a gauntlet, and Cubs were good. And the Mets, they were built to last. Like, the Mets would be there to stay. The Cubs would retool by 89, as we've discussed that. Totally different team. Where the Mets were in this every year through 89, basically.
Well, and it's funny. So the Cubs get through that, not only the 4-game sweep of the Mets, but they had beaten the Expos twice before. So they had a 6-game winning streak. And now they have to go on a road trip where they got 4 games in Montreal, 3 games in Houston, and 3 games in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Well, that's right. We can't forget that the Reds were in the West.
Yeah.
Which always made a lot of sense.
We're just at a game we have to discuss. One of those Montreal games, which would be Well, Lee Smith got the save, right? It was the home game. It was the home. So, all right, before the Cubs spanked the Mets the second time at home, when they also had to knock off Philly and jump into first place for the last time all year. When they beat the Expos 2 out of 3, they lost the first game. They won the second game in the rubber match. And look who the winning pitcher was for that game. This is the game. So every game is tense, right? Like you can't lose any games. And Lee Smith would kind of walk a high wire act a lot of times. It felt like in 84, he was a little bit more dominant in 82 and 83. He got a lot of saves, but he'd put guys on base. And every game is crucial here. Going into the Cubs are only got a half game lead in first. Mets are winning. Phillies are winning. Holding on, Smith gets 2 runners on base, I believe, or just 1. We should probably look it up here, first and second. But in the rubber match, hoping to take this next series, Pete Rose, who earlier this season.
So this series was this actually happened in the first game of the series.
Oh,
Lee had a save in the first and the last game. This happens in the first game. This happens on what day is this? Thursday,
right.
August 2nd.
So it's not the rubber match. Thank you.
Still
a noteworthy game.
Bryn Smith against Rick Sutcliffe. So there's a lot at stake there if Lee had pissed away the lead in the ninth. But yes, everything else. The Cubs had a 3-2 lead going into the top of the ninth. Sutcliffe was going to try to finish it himself. But Tim Wallach got a single. The great Miguel Dillon pinch ran for him.
Pitcher, right? No. Oh, Miguel Dillon, former Cub.
Oh, Dillon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's what
he batted like .330 for Cleveland after he left the Cubs in 1980.
Dillon. How fancy.
Yeah.
Sutcliffe struck out Darrell Thomas, Derrel Thomas.
Yep.
Mike Stenhouse pinch hit for Doug Flynn, and he singled, which sent Dillon to third. So first and third, only 1 out. And little Jimmy Fry and his orthopedic shoes and his... Oh, here's the thing. Because I'm remembering this. So one of the things that's linked to the post that goes with this podcast, if you go and look on Pointless Exercise or on Discipio, it's on both places, is a video called A Cubs Win. It's a 1984 season review video. And just look at, there's a bunch of interviews, all from you can tell it's the same day because you can see Rick Sutcliffe throwing a bullpen in the background behind Jim. Every time they cut to him, it's Sutcliffe. Either he threw a lot of bullpens that year or they did all these interviews one day. It looks like Jim Fry sat on his glasses at some point before the interview because he's got those weird, they're kind of Harry Carey-ish.
Yeah.
Not quite as thick, but they're
Sally,
plastic all the way
Jesse,
around.
Raphael. Yeah.
And when he's looking, and he's got the transition lenses, so they're always like half sunglasses whenever he's talking to anybody. But if you look at them, and now that I tell you this is all you'll see when you look at him, it looks like his glasses are somehow like mushed in the middle because they're like sticking away from his eyes as they get towards
the arms sticking out.
Yeah, it's like, how can you see anything through that? Anyway. So Jim and his his broken glasses and his orthopedic shoes has to go out. And he has to bring to bring in Lee Smith to pitch to
with 1 out, only 1 out in the ninth.
To pitch to
Pete
Rose
on third,
with runners at first and third.
Who earlier in the season, and Harry would tell us this when the Cubs were beating Dwight Gooden in the home opener, that New Montreal Expo Pete Rose had collected his 4,000th hit on Friday the 13th of the season of April. Pete Rose, of course, it's one of those funny things, right? Where like for us, Tom Seaver was a Red and Pete Rose was a Philly because when we started watching sports, those were the guys, like they were legends, but Tom Seaver had all these years with the Mets. Oh, Pete Rose had all these years with the Reds. But Rose was he was on the team that won Philly's first World Series championship in 80. He played in the World Series in 83. He played like 6 World Series. Obviously, we know about Pete Rose. It was weird that he was an Expo, but he shows up, and now you're really freaking out because Pete Rose, even at like 44, the guy knows how to hit, especially if he knows a fastball's coming. And so even at that age, a little nerve-wracking here. And so you got Sutcliffe with a winning streak. What was Sutcliffe's record at that point?
This ended up being his 12th win.
Yeah.
And he won 14 in a row to finish the season, right? He
came over 2-4
2-1
or something. Yeah.
As a his loss was in his third decision, and then he won 14 in a row after that to go 16-1.
Yeah.
So runners at first and third. The Cubs, first place Cubs. And we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Pete hits a line drive right back up the middle, and it hits Lee right in his fat ass.
Nice.
And it harmlessly floats up in the air where Dave Owen grabs it and throws to first. And
a 1-6-3 game-ending line-out double play.
The highlight montage at the beginning of this podcast has this highlight in it. And ironically, it's the only time you hear Steve Stone in those highlights, and it's mostly because all I could find is the only thing I can find clips of. I'm too lazy to go through games and try to pull stuff out. I mean, you get what you're paid for with the podcast. It's all radio stuff except for this, and so you hear Steve yelling, "The game's over! The game's over!" while the ball is still in the air because Dave's going to catch it. And he's going to have an easy double play, and then Harry's immortal line at the end, which is, "The good Lord wants the Cubs to win."
It really felt like, hey, they just got into first place. They just beaten the Mets 3 out of 4. Pete Rose normally gets a hit, and they lose. Like we were waiting for it, right? If you were there in '69, like our friend Forklift was in the bleachers when Willie Stargell hit that homer off of, Phil Reagan on Labor Day, and like the winds turn. Like you're waiting for that moment, like you said. Instead, you get one of the most bonkers end to a game in that double play, and so. And not the last time Pete Rose, oddly enough, will cross paths with the '84 Cubs.
No, which is odd considering
it is odd.
He will not cross them as an Expo again.
No, in fact, that might have been one of his last at bats as an Expo.
You mean they cut him because he hit Lee Smith in the ass? The guy can't even hit the ball past Lee Smith's fat ass. Get out of here, you weird bowl haircut and gambling on the horses from the club.
So I can see they really bolster their position. They're cleaning up on their AL East opponents. They keep taking series, but then of course I referenced earlier what a house of horrors the Astrodome was, and you see where they get swept 3 there, and so there's another. That shoe can still drop, right? They lose 3 in a row in Houston, and they go from 4.5 up to 2.5. So hey man, we got 6 weeks to go. We can still blow this easily. And now we're going to Friday, August 17th to the shitty Reds, but all of a sudden there's a circus sideshow about that.
Okay, so this is a perfect segue because I pulled this up. So that was not the last time Pete played, not even the last series that Pete played against the Cubs as an Expo.
Because when they went to Montreal and took 2 out of 3.
Yes, and he played in the game on August 12th against the Cubs, pinch hit. And then they... I don't know if it was a waiver trade or they just put him on waivers. And everybody's like, fine, the Reds can have Pete back.
Well, that's what it was. He was engineering it in the back room. Like he wanted to go home to Cincinnati. Frankly, it was a novelty. I was excited because I'm like, what? A player manager? Like, I remember Don Kessinger was a player manager of the White Sox when I first started watching baseball, but that seems like an old
Cubs radio analyst Lou Boudreau was a famous player.
Correct.
Manager.
The same year he won MVP in '48.
So here's an odd quirk of the schedule. So between August 2nd and August 19th, Pete played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games. And he played in 8 of them against the Cubs. He played in 5 of them with the Expos, and then his first series with the Reds was against the Cubs starting on the 17th. And now he's in the starting lineup because he's playing for the Reds. He's not pitch hitting anymore.
And he was going to take a back seat, but then he put himself in the lineup that whole weekend. So again, like kind of a distraction, kind of exciting and weird and historic. And like here, Pete Rose, like I said, we never saw him play for the Reds. We were too young. We thought he was a Philly. Oh, yeah, that's where he made his mark. And now blah, blah, blah. Harry and Steve would tell us how the connection between Jim Fry and Don Zimmer, they all grew up in Cincinnati. We're in Cincinnati. But it was a little bit of a distraction. Mario Soto still on top of his game, probably cooled down after forcing Zimmer to vomit on the field. He's on the hill again. Once again, it's a big game, and Dick Ruthin's got to go out there for the Cubs. Yep. And Rose had a big hit. I put this game's on YouTube. Rose, of course, had a big hit, nice clean single to start the scoring. And again, we need to win games. It's almost like in '98 when the Cubs were striving to make the playoffs, and the home run chase was a little bit of a distraction. It was like shit like this was like, and they kind of seem to give the shitty Reds momentum, and and the Cubs lose their fourth in a row, and they're still a game and a half up, and this and that. But again, you got Rick Sutcliffe going, although he didn't apparently have his best outing.
So how about this? In the opener, Pete puts himself in the lineup and bats himself second. He's like, I do whatever I want. His was his slash line after the game. 262, 337, not bad. His slugging was 301.
It's like Ray Ordonez.
Try to mix in a double once in a while, Pete. Jesus.
He did have a double in this game, I believe. No,
well, there you go. That put his slugging up to 301. So apparently he was slugging under 300 for the Expos.
And and it had to be iconic because he did a head first slide. Because it was like he did one of those. He sliced a nice line drive to left center, right? So it was tailing away from Dernier, and he rounded first, and he did his patented head first slide, and it was like. I don't remember. I remember watching the game. I was probably sick to my stomach. It's like, that must be a bad omen. But no, they came back the next day with Sutcliffe, even though Sutcliffe must have given up a lot of runs to stop the bleeding. But then they were about to lose the rubber match on Sunday when Thad Bosley, former White Sox, who had found himself on the 84 Cubs, and Richie Hebner. Had to get a Richie Hebner name drop. Longtime Cub killer, apparently, in the 70s as a third baseman for the Pirates. Was basically the Cubs' top pinch hitter in 84. But Bosley started becoming that guy, and it all started on the Sunday. And there was a story told years later that Bosley had his bags packed. He was ready to leave that day, apparently. He hadn't batted in several weeks, blah, blah, blah. And in that game, the Sunday game, at some point in the game, the Cubs were losing, and he comes off the bench and hits a 3-run homer to tie the game, or he put him up with a 3-run homer. But yeah, the nice little feel-good story was that meant that Thad Bosley got to stay. So, Cub fans from this time.
He had a 3-run homer off of Jeff Russell, and he scored Jody Davis and Larry Boa. How did Larry get on? Did somebody hit him in the head? No, he reached on a ground out to second. Fielder's choice. That was the only way Larry ever got on base.
Yep.
Here I got a couple of defensive. I don't know why I just worked this in now. So the 84 Cubs had the. I know what it's from on the video. Sutcliffe talks about why he's having they're interviewing during the season. He's talking about why he's having so much more success with the Cubs than he was with the Indians.
Right.
And he's basically saying, I'm not really pitching a lot different. But I'm on a better team, and I'm a team with a better defense. And I'm thinking, man, how bad was the Indians' defense? Because you have some really good defensive players on the Cubs. You do. Three.
Stanberg, Dernier, yes, and Jody. And one's in the battery, yeah.
And then, other than the people, I think will always think of Leon with the ball.
No, he's good first baseman.
He was a good first baseman. So
he was.
You had 4 guys, but you also had some abysmal, like Moreland in right field was basically,
and Matthews in left.
Matthews was the original catch-22. If you hit 50 balls to him, he catches 22.
Yeah.
And then on the left side of the infield, you had statues, tiny statues, even not even big statues. Larry Bowa and Ron Say.
I referenced the rubber match of that Philly series in early August when Henry Cotto played for Dernier. The third game is on YouTube. Watch it because early on, like Von Hayes, a few guys hit like hard hit balls to the left side, and like by the time Bo and Say have so much time to get over because the ball just died. Like that was not a myth. They talked about it. That was not overblown. And I hate to bring too much attention to it because then you'll use that to diminish Sandberg. But that's no, Sandberg didn't need the help.
Well, no,
those guys
Sandberg
on the left side did.
And then Sandberg was a great defensive second baseman long after they were actually mowing the grass.
Correct, but they were not mowing.
And I also think
obvious because
you know damn well that the left side of the infield was a lot higher than the right side of the infield was.
Probably because because
you're not going to penalize the 2 guys who can field, and they're going to help your pitching staff
right,
get out.
Because you could kill some balls that they would not have trouble with otherwise. They were both like 38, right?
Yeah,
Bo was definitely
they were old.
38.
They were tiny. So like this year, the Cubs are having. If you want to, you can do this. It's an exercise you can do at your own house. So if you want to see how big Larry Bowa and Ron Say were, the Cubs are giving out bobbleheads of the statues. So you're going to get a bobblehead of the Billy Williams statue and the Ernie Banks statue and the all the other Fergie and Ronnie and Harry. If you take two of the bobblehead statues, and you go out in your backyard and you put them, I don't know, 22 feet apart, and then just back up. That's what it was like having Larry and Say playing. Pretend you're standing on the mountain, look over your shoulder, and go, are they even there? But here's why I brought them up. In 1984, Ron Say came within 3 games of breaking the all-time errorless record in a season for third baseman. Not Cubs record. Major League Baseball record. He went 60 games without an error. I have a feeling he probably had like 3 putouts. And at the time, in 1984, Larry Bowa had the highest fielding percentage of any shortstop ever in the history of Major League Baseball. The guy with the highest fielding percentage was Larry Bowa. And so if you want to see just how useless errorless streaks and fielding percentage is, there's your good example. And I say that knowing that one of my favorite things was the fact that Ryne Sandberg once went an entire 162 game span without a throwing error. A guy who played second base, who made not half, but probably a third of his throws starting with his back to the first baseman. Never threw the ball away. That to me is really impressive. Yeah. Larry Bowa getting to like 3 balls a game and not, probably putting most of them in his pocket. Oh, I can't make that throw.
I'm going to say to Bowa's defense, most of that must have been built on years in Philadelphia and playing on turf. He obviously had to be a good shortstop.
I mean, we know that Larry was he was a shortstop of the 70s and 80s where he wasn't expected
Johnny LeMaster, and all. Yeah.
And he was a quick little guy, and I'm sure he was a good defensive shortstop for a long time. Yeah. But by the time he got to the Cubs, he was not good at anything, really. He was just kind of he was our gutty little field general who
he was like the captain, yeah.
Who there's a reason why we do this. We're doing this podcast about the 1984 Cubs. Dave Owen comes up like 3 or 4 times and Larry doesn't. Because at the end of games, Dave was the one who was actually on the field, not Larry. He'd either been pinch hit for
on that roster.
He couldn't pinch hit. He got pinch hit for because he couldn't hit. Or they took him out to put an adult-sized shortstop in late in the game.
Yeah, they didn't need him out there for defense. Wait. So we get through like some of those bumps, the Pete Rose series. Now we're getting in late August. Cubs are holding on. The lead gets up to 5.5, looking pretty good, right? So nothing really stands out. They go through the NL West, but now there's one more series in New York. It's really kind of a chance. Friday, September 7th. This season cannot end without at least one more Dwight Gooden, Dick Ruthven matchup. And Gooden just outdoes himself. I see the scores 10-0. Yeah. It kind of didn't matter though, because the Cubs are up 7 going into this. So now that they got the Mets backs to the wall, it's kind of nice in a way. So let Gooden have his game. I think he had a 1-hitter. And unlike the other times where even though Ruthven was overmatched, he actually pitched admirably. He pitched like Dick Ruthven on this game. And so Gooden chalks up another, he goes 3-2 against the Cubs. And by the way, when the Cubs pinned Gooden's ears back in Wrigley in just a month earlier, they would not then beat him again for literally 5 years, by the way. It's Gooden.
It wasn't,
you talk about Aaron Rodgers.
It wasn't Randy Johnson bad, who they never beat.
It was worse because Johnson was just spread out over his whole career. The Cubs Gooden was they had to face that motherfucker 5-6 times a year, and he beat him. I mean, it was just the Cubs had to pay the price for beating his ass twice in '85. That's kind of how I looked at it. Gooden was one of the best pitchers in the game.
Still worth it,
and he was worth it. Damn it! And so he gets that game on Friday. They close within 6, so there's still a little bit of a. We got that psyche, right? You can't blame us. It's festering in the house. There's 69. They're down to 6. Who do we have going on Saturday, though? Rick Sutcliffe. What does he do? That was another fucking shutout.
4-hit shutout with 12 strikeouts and no walks.
In your face, New York. And that was it. That was the effective clincher, I feel like, especially looking at it now. They put him back up 7. They even let the Mets take a series for the first time since May. They take 2 up, but the Cubs got the one game that they really needed there. I went to one more game, and it was Saturday, September 15th. Got to talk about this game. A little bit iconic. And I've been going to the bleachers since I was a kid. Said it before, like my dad, it's the cheapest way to take out the whole family. My brother was going to school in the city, but he didn't start school till October. So he was still home, and he's telling me, I'm now starting 7th grade. He's like, we're going to go to that Cubs game Saturday. We're going to sit in the bleachers. So I'm all excited about it, like for 2 weeks. And I'm nervous. I'm like, it's going to be crazy. Like, we're in September now. The Cubs are closing in on something that is just really unprecedented, right? It's been 39 years. And I'm like bugging my brother. He's been going to the bleachers since, the 60s. And just like, I'm anxious, but sure enough, we didn't have to get there super early, but we got there early. We're in line. We're waiting for the gates to open because they did not sell bleacher tickets ahead of time until after this day. You didn't have to get there that early. You could, because we would go with my dad when he got there early. Just, you go when the game starts. You sit, 15th row. But we got there early enough to get a ticket and be in about the 3rd or 4th row in right field. A couple things I remember about this day is, number one, I went to use the washroom and I came back and my brother was laughing because he said that the Mets were taking batting practice and they threw a ball into the stands and that the fans got on this one fan. They would throw that ball back. And I'm like, really? I'm like, what do you do? My brother was like, he threw it back. I'm like, really? I'm like, what would you do? He's like, would you have kept it? He's like, fuck yeah, I would have kept it. What are you, crazy? But that happened, and then other guys started throwing it back, and it got to the point where the Mets were starting to wear batting helmets. Right? I'm just like, we're going out of our mind, right? This is unprecedented. The fan, we're feeling it. We've got a lot of angst that we're getting off of our shoulders. I'm not even saying I participated in it, but this is the mentality that some of the Mets had to wear helmets. So I only cite this because I don't know what the real history is of the tradition of throwing real home run balls that happened in games back. The idea of throwing any ball back was kind of unheard of in 1984, just judging by my brother's reaction, because like he couldn't believe that this guy let people bully him into throwing the ball back. But at least I can say that I know of no other incidents earlier than that where that tradition sort of morphed into an opposing, and it's fine. Like if I've never caught a live ball. If I catch an opposing home, I don't know. Maybe by now, I guess I would be compelled to throw it back, but kind of unheard of. Then that started. The other thing that started, that, or at least in my knowledge, started, and this was something that happened during a game of the week 5 years later, made me so angry that caused me to write a letter to the editors of the Sporting News when in 1988, Joe Garagiola, covering a New York Mets game and fans were chanting Darryl, said, the Darryl chant, which started in the 1986 World Series against Boston. I was like, bullshit. I was there September, whatever it was, September 15th, 1984, when everyone started, and they may have done it that whole weekend. They may have done it early. They may have done it the year before. Strawberry was the defending rookie of the year. He was hot shit. He was a scary, awesome player before, he self-destructed. He was kind of at his peak. He was the defending rookie of the year. Gooden would be that season's rookie of the year. And like we said, the Mets were a team on the rise. Strawberry, he had a 3-homer game against the Cubs in a meaningless game the year before in September, and he was just, and so, of course, you heckle the superstar, and that was the chant. And so I remember having a lot of fun that day. And then the Cubs won, and like at this point now, it's like it's kind of a matter of time before we clinch. It's kind of a weird feeling. And actually, this was the Sunday. I think it was it was the Saturday game. It was Towel Day. And what I remember about this
was Mark Pryor there.
Mark Pryor was not there, nor was Larry Ross
warming up in the bullpen with his towel.
But when Lee Smith was closing the game out, everybody was waving the towels when Lee Smith was closing out the game. And the umpires had to keep stopping.
Oh, because they're white towels?
Yes, of course. And it became
But still, what's
part
the
of
the batter size there for a reason?
That's the batter size, right. It became part of like the footage when you'd play the next year, right? Like they'd show the clip of Lee Smith going set and like everyone's waving their towel. It was just like, for me to be 12 years old, like so privileged, just like you, to have gone to so many games that year. I went to 4 games in like an 11-day period in June. Went to a couple others with my dad. I'm here in September, this unprecedented thing. Remember, too, right? Like, Chicago sports was a goddamn wasteland. Like, just...
Do you think Al had, in his journal, was keeping track of the Cubs records when they had his lucky towel?
Probably
Dear
started
diary.
Me too. Another tradition.
Dear diary, got a towel at the Cub game today, and they won.
But, like, we knew, like, the Hawks went to the Cup final in 71-73. The Bulls, when they were in the old Western Conference, made the conference finals in 75. But
Jerry
that's
Sloan, Chet
right.
Walker, Bob Love, Tom
Boerwinkle. But like, first of all, the Bulls and the Hawks always ranked behind the baseball and football teams.
Right.
Between 1963 and 83, it was a fucking wasteland in this town, right? Between the Bears champion and all of a sudden the White Sox in 83 out of the blue win. And I remember being so jealous and just despondent. And then it just totally happened.
Yeah, it was a golden era of sports in Chicago.
Followed by an actual dynasty with a championship. And then the Bulls were sure. I mean, the world changed.
Well, I mean, even in 84, you had the White Sox were the defending AL West champions. They did what the White Sox do. They went right back to irrelevance. That was fun.
Yep.
Cubs win the division. The Bulls draft Michael Jordan.
Yep.
The Bears actually win a playoff game.
Yeah.
And then and we already knew that the Bears were super fun. We knew there was something there.
Absolutely.
And then the Blackhawks were doing whatever. They're skating around, whatever the fuck the Blackhawks were doing.
So we're in the bleachers. It was a weird, I'm only 12, but even then I was like nobody around. Like it was just look, at that point, divisional play had been around 15 years. The longest drought by any team, like the old measure was World Series, but the distance between playoff appearances was actually the White Sox between 1919 and 59. Cubs have gone 39 years. Longer streaks have come and gone since then. But it was just extraordinary. So that Saturday felt like a coronation. We're waving the towels. They lose the next day. Who cares? The Mets are done. Cubs are baiting to have. And then what happens? Just when you think you're done, like the hand comes out of the water, like in Deliverance, things would be completed. The Cubs actually endure what would become their longest losing streak of the season, just to make things a little bit interesting. But I think they really had built up too much cushion. But still, one more panic.
Can't live without it. Remember in
fucking Pirates
2016, the best Cub team we've ever seen.
And went 5-15 at one point.
Yeah, they go and they still have like an 8-game lead, and fans are literally just shitting themselves. Like here it comes, they're bad.
That was a little unprecedented because most teams
somehow the 2016 Cubs had a must-win game against the Pirates the day before the All-Star break.
Yes.
And it was only must-win for like our mental health. That was the only reason they needed to win it, because it was standings wise they were
far out in front. But that team was unprecedented because normally teams that win 100 games will like usually win like 8 out of 12, but then they'll also have like 3 or 4 where they lose like 5 out of 8. The Cubs didn't really have any 5 out. They just had a 15 out of 20, and then they were like the 84 Tigers practically the rest of the way. So, yeah. But anyway, 5. So they lose 3 in a row to Pittsburgh at home. Like Sutcliffe almost loses the game. They go into St. Louis.
Part of the angst was fans who just wanted them
clinch it.
Yeah, just clinch it. We win these. They've got
10 days still,
but they want to see it at home, right?
Oh yeah.
So just win these games. Yeah. Then they lose. They lose the last game to the Mets.
Yeah.
Then they lose to the Pirates. Now they can't clinch at home.
They're not gonna
but they still lose, and then they lose again, and then they go to St. Louis and they lose, and then the Cubs
Kirk
are like, all right.
Kepshire shuts them down. And that, so Kirk Kepshire, and he also had a big win against him during the 13-game losing streak the next year. Somehow they'd run into Kirk Kepshire on a Friday night.
Yeah, you can't.
And now the losing streak's at 5. Saturday gets rained out, and they needed it. And then Sunday, I remember they had like Jack Brickhouse in the booth. They had Lou Boudreau. They kind of felt like, all right, this bullshit's over. Even though they hadn't won in a week. And sure enough, like Matthews, I think, just took over both games. They sweep the Cardinals. They clinch a tie. And then after not even a day off, the very next day, Pittsburgh. So that was it. So, yeah, basically the 5-game losing streak was immediately followed by clinching a tie and then clinching a win. And over the course of 3 days. And there you have it. It actually happened.
So one thing we want to talk about with this was Harry, 1984 Harry, is still really good Harry. Like, you heard a bunch of clips at the beginning of this podcast, and anything you hear, he is, you understand when you hear him,
he's
why every place he'd ever been loved having Harry as their announcer. He's a homer, but he's a really good baseball announcer.
It's infectious. It feels like a carnival. Like there's so many games in 84 on YouTube. He's just crackling. He's like just constantly talking, but not talking like Chip Carey. He's just cracker day. He's just saying like, Glenn Gorman has driven in from Oak Park tonight to see the Cubs. Like, he's just rattling off names left and right. This group comes in from Illinois State. They drove up from Bloomington last night. Hey, Arnie, he's just like
he talks so much. You really wonder when he's drinking. Like, how can you stay this drunk if you're just going to talk all the time? Maybe he was doing the Stevie Nicks thing where, I don't know, did he have Steve like blowing Budweiser into his ass
alcohol
during games?
Steve,
I'm not going to be able to stop talking. You're just going to have to use the straw again. Oh, and for you kids at home, if your broadcaster announcer wants you to blow Budweiser up his ass, say no the first time, because it starts a vicious circle. Anyway, so Harry's really good. And then we get to the moment we've all been waiting for. The Cubs are at Pittsburgh. Rick Sutcliffe is shoving it up the Pirates. The Cubs score 3 runs relatively early. We're cruising to this win. Harry is talking about, he gets to Joe Orsulek has 2 strikes on him. Harry's talking about, all you people at home, you ought to come.
The fans in the stands, 39 years of waiting.
Strike 3 happens, and Harry is clearly not looking. He has no fucking idea that the game's over, and he grunts. There's like this, and then he just starts yelling, the Cubs are the champions. The Cubs are the champions.
Yeah,
Harry, you had one moment to get ready for the whole season, and you missed it.
Yeah,
now, I'm sure that, especially under Tribune ownership, I'm sure there were like 12 assholes in the booth who shouldn't have been there. Who just because they own the team and they own GM, they can be up there, and there's people, it's distracting, and Harry looks down for a minute, looks up, and it's like, oh crap, it's over.
Could be.
But the funny thing is, when the Cubs clinch in '89 in Montreal, another nondescript stadium with half a fan, that's
all Cub
two-thirds
fans.
empty, and it's all Cub fans. He misses that one too.
He missed it again. He did. Yeah, Harry.
Oh.
Yeah, not his finest moment.
I'm sure Milo was all fucking over it on the radio.
Yeah.
No, it should have been Vince, right?
It would have been Milo, and I guess Vince only in the middle, I guess. I'm not sure. Yeah, we've talked about it before. I'm not exactly sure how that played out.
I don't know what the GN radio rotation was.
Yeah, just that Harry would switch with Milo. And so
it is funny, though. I'm sure this was because of my dad. I don't think I came to this on my own. But as a kid, I never cared for Milo.
We didn't either.
I just thought Milo seemed like a prick.
There's something about him.
And I loved Vince. I loved Vince and Lou. That, to me, that was the Cub radio.
That's the soundtrack. Well, that's the soundtrack, too, because oftentimes, although, like I said, we were kids, we had access to games on TV. But whenever you're out and about, especially with your dad, like doing if the game's
on the farm,
on,
we had no matter what we were doing outside, the radio was
games
on.
Yeah, Vince and Lou.
So we heard far more games than I saw that year because he had me out wandering around doing shit.
Sure, you had to hear Pete Rose's line drive described.
Yeah,
slapping off Elise.
Yeah, hit his big fat ass.
But that would have been Milo.
Lou? Fuck that guy. That's what Lou. No. That's what I remember. I remember Lou Boudreau's call that with Vince. Vince like, hit him in the fat ass, and Lou's like, yeah, fuck that guy. I never liked Pete Rose. He's an ass.
Right.
Like,
He's a dick.
All right, Lou, we have to bleep all that. But so as a kid, I remember thinking that Lou Boudreau and Vince Lloyd were like a great radio team. Like, I was convinced of that because you're a kid, you don't know different. But honestly, I think I was right. I really do think they were really good.
I think, like I said, we talked about it pregame. Lou Boudreau was kind of like, people give Steve Stone credit, or like Jim Deshaies. I love Jim Deshaies. Lou Boudreau was a very adroit, articulate, eloquent, smart. He made the game bite-sized. He'd make predictions. Like, he knew the game and he did his homework. And I felt, and usually it was because I was too young to really appreciate it. I could just kind of tell the reaction of the elders and like the family, like my dad, like they always sort of thought of Lou positively. He really was good at sort of keeping things informed.
Yeah, Vince had the cool voice.
He did.
And they were just really good together. And then, I mean, in my mind, the way it worked, you're right. I don't know where Milo fit in.
Yeah.
Now, we told the story before on a previous podcast about how when Jack retired, Milo was super excited, right? I mean, he came to the Cubs. He signed a new deal with the Cubs. He was going to take over for Jack.
81. Yep, 2 years and then take over.
And then they basically announced at the same time they're thanking Jack and congratulating him, they're ushering in Harry Carey, which just pissed Milo off to no end. So I don't know how in my mind, I can't think back to how the rotation worked, because like for a regular game, in my mind, it was Vince and Lou did the first 3 with Harry and Steve on TV. Then the middle 3 was Harry and Lou.
Yep.
And then Milo doing the middle three on TV, and then the end was, but it couldn't have been that way. There's no way Milo only worked 3 innings. There's no way he would have let that.
Well, and the other thing is, I remember Lou coming over on TV sometimes too, but that was maybe before. I can't remember.
Well, that was when Steve was selling. He was busy having to sell prearranged funeral things.
I heard about that. Well, Stoney came, I think in the '82 season, they didn't have Stone. Harry came in '82. Stone came in '83. Yeah. But like Harry didn't replace. He replaced Jack, but they didn't. It was weird. You're right, because Milo was hired to replace Jack supposedly. So I don't know what other broadcasters they had, but it generally was though. Harry, like you said, Harry would be in the radio in the middle 3 innings, and then if the game wasn't on TV, then he was the primary guy.
Yep. Yeah, Harry did every inning. No. Harry was working no matter how long the game went.
Yep.
He wasn't taking any innings. He wasn't taking a dump in the 5th inning.
Even the playoff games.
Actually, Harry probably was taking a dump in the 5th inning. He just had the mic with him.
Right. Yeah, he just had a bucket. Yeah, he had a mic with him.
Oh, God. What do you know that corn? Steve, was that a strike?
Right. You know, it's funny. Harry did do cup playoff games. So we go to the playoffs, and now the city's bonkers. Do you remember who broadcast the games on ABC?
Yeah, it was Keith Jackson.
Nope.
On ABC?
Yep.
I thought it was Earl Weaver.
May have done. Yeah, Earl Weaver was in the booth.
Yeah. I thought it was Earl Weaver, Keith Jackson.
Nope.
Okay, who was it?
Don Drysdale.
Oh, okay.
And Reggie Jackson, who was still playing. So Drysdale in a sense had replaced Harry Carey. He was a White Sox announcer that had come over with Sports Vision. Him and Hawk Harrelson and Early Wynn, like they had a whole new thing. They got rid of Harry, Jimmy Pearsall, and whatever. And Drysdale did Sox games on Sports Vision, but he was still connected to ABC to the point where he was there. Keith Jackson must have been doing the Royals Tigers series. All I remember though is that we were outraged at how much we were all convinced in Chicago how much the announcers hated the Cubs.
Yeah.
And that it was even brought up on Channel 7 News that all the mail they were getting, which is just funny. It just kind of speaks to us being kind of goofs, probably, I think.
And the real reason, I have a feeling had the series only been 2 games long, no one would have thought that.
Maybe, yeah.
But
maybe.
You go to San Diego, you go to San Diego, and then the first game goes poorly. They get blown out, basically.
Yeah.
And then
there will be tomorrow.
We can get to this shit, I guess. We have to go through. It's 1984. We have to get to it. But I just have a feeling then everything, because the walls were crumbling down around us.
Yes.
Take it out on the announcers.
Announcers make it worse. Yeah. Somehow I thought they were complaining.
Reggie's an asshole. Yeah. One of the things I learned from the Bo Jackson book that Jeff Perlman wrote was the first time Bo Jackson met Reggie Jackson.
Okay.
Bo wanted to kick his ass. He just thought Reggie was the biggest asshole he'd ever met. And he just wanted to kick his ass. And it just made me love Bo that much more.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see Reggie rubbing people the wrong way. He's got the air about him.
Reggie was basically comparing the two of them as athletes. Great athletes
Reggie,
like us, and Bo's
Reggie was not even Reggie was not even a great all-around baseball.
No, he couldn't field for shit.
Maybe he was younger. I think maybe he was a decent outfielder for Oakland. I don't know.
When he was an Oriole,
did he have a cannon? The 1 year
he was the ball. He was an Oriole.
Yeah, what's funny is that I stayed home from school on opening day in what could have been a meaningless season, and yet I did not stay home from school in the playoffs. And I think the only reason is because it would have been obvious why I was staying home from school. But like my mom would have called in for me. My sister got home. Like, I don't know.
He's got Cub fever.
It's okay. I had the VHS. I got all these games on tape. But I remember my mom picked me up and she's like, "No, here's what I remember. There were some cool teachers at Lively Junior High that would wheel in goddamn television or radio.
Our teacher, Mr. Letcher, listened both days. We listened to the game on the radio.
I had, on the other hand, Mr. Anderson, who was just a stale, old, crusty math teacher. He liked sports. He claimed he liked sports, but he was there to teach math, right? And so, the game starts at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And so school ends at 2:40. We're going to see most of the game, but I'd rather see all of it or hear all of it. And so we're in math. And all the way at the other end of the hall is young Mr. Kahn in science. Good looking Mr. Kahn. He was the basketball coach, everyone loved Mr. Khan. And of course, Mr. Khan brings the radio. I think it was a radio. I don't think it was a TV, whatever. Some live communication of the game is all the way at the other end of the hall. So obviously, everyone that's listening to this knows what happens in the first game. Sutcliffe, I don't know what he does in the top of the first. Bobby fucking Dernier, in the first Cubs postseason at bat in 39 years, hits a home run, right? And then two batters later, Gary Matthews hits a home run. I'll never forget that because I remember exactly. It's almost like the Kennedy assassination because I'm like sitting here and you just hear an eruption down the hall, right? And you're dying and you're like, you're such a dick, Mr. Anderson. You're right, and fucking polynomials on the board and I don't know what's going on. It's got to be good. And then like 2 minutes later, you hear another chair because Matthews hits a homer. And like by the time my mom picked me up, she's like, even the pitcher hit a homer. I'm like, what? Rick Sutcliffe? But I remember like when the class ended, the bell hits, we're like running down the hall towards and they're running out with the news. Like, hey, Bob Dinner hit a homer. We're just like, tell me what happened.
So you're equating in American history John F. Kennedy having his top of his head blown off, right, with Eric Shaw giving up 2 homers to the first 3 batters. Right. I think I am on board. I agree. Before we get to the playoffs, because it's probably time to talk about the playoffs. I didn't realize this till I just looked. Do you know how the 1984 regular season ended, and how it's kind of a perfect encapsulation of the Cubs were playing the Cardinals, and it's kind of a perfect little bow on the regular season.
I see from the box score they beat Suter.
They walked up. Bruce Suter blew a lead in the 9th inning of the final game of the season. The Cubs were down 1-0, and this ragtag group: Henry Cotto singled, Dan Roan singled, Thad Bosley singled, which scored Henry to tie the game.
Tied the game up.
Then Gary Woods walked, and Keith Moreland had a RBI. No, he didn't get an RBI. So here's what happened. I see if you can figure this out. Moreland grounds to third. There's a force out at home. Okay, I did figure it out. So they force out. Dan Roan's forced out at home. They must have tried. They did. They tried to get a double play. They threw the ball away.
And that's how the game ends?
So then Bosley scored to win the game. So Bruce Suter blew a save on the final day of the season.
What Bruce Suter had at stake for that save?
Oh, probably some kind of bonus, right?
What would have been the new all-time Major League record for saves in a season.
Oh, that's too bad.
Tied Dan Quisenberry, I want to say. It's been broken since then. I think Bobby Thigpen might still have the record. But Suter did actually set the National League record for saves in 1984 with 45, I believe.
Yeah, and that was his 8th blown save.
And 2 against the Cubs. So either one of those would have given him the Major League mark. Instead, he had to settle for a tie with Quisenberry until, I'm pretty sure that record stood until Thigpen blew it in 1990, 6 years later. But I did not see that game because I was watching, and we mentioned this when we did a Bears-Cowboys, remember this crap, but I was in attendance when once again the Dallas Cowboys beat the Bears Soldier for the last time in a while. I just remember like hearing the end of the Cubs game, and then the Cubs all came out and paraded around the field and waved hi to the fans and said thanks.
So the Cubs were in the playoffs for the first time since 1945, when they lost the World Series to the Tigers, and they break out all the stops for the opener for the first playoff game at Wrigley. Ernie Banks threw out the first pitch in full uniform.
Oh, the Ronnie Woo Woo style.
Yeah, it may have been Ronnie, honestly. I saw that and was like, you go going Bob Feller, put the whole uniform on. You think he went and sat in stands then in full uniform? I mean, in case they want to activate me for the game, I'm ready. Like, okay, Ernie, no, we're not going to do that. Do you know who sang the national anthem and why?
I do, because we discussed it, because I thought he only did it in 89. He did it in 84 and 89. It was Jimmy Buffett, who was personal friend with Steve Goodman.
Who had died on
just died.
September 20th.
Yeah. Because Steve Goodman, of course, who wrote City of New Orleans and, a few other Why Don't We Get Drunk and Screw that David Allan Coe made famous. Local guy, I think Niles North, been on the scene, was going to Cubs games in the 60s. He had cancer for like 10 years. He wrote Dying Cub Fans' Last Request, which pissed off Dallas Green. And in response, as an act of good faith, he wrote Go Cubs Go, which in 1984 replaced the Let's Go, bump, 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 batters up, bump, bump. That used to be the radio. We're taking the afternoon off. That used to be the intro to WGN, the standard.
A superior song. And we've talked
The
about how
standard
a lot of
universal.
people are convinced that Go Cubs Go is intentionally shitty.
Campy. Yeah.
Because he's
Yeah.
like, okay, fine. You want me to write a
Steve
positive song? I'll
Goodman
fucking
is
do
a-
it. Here
Steve
you go.
Goodman is
Deal
a-
with this piece of shit. And now
he
we
is
still hear it. Like
he is
this
a-
year, they played after
right.
every Cub win at Wrigley.
Right.
We'll hear it like 12 times.
Steve Goodman, thank you. He is a posthumously Grammy Award-winning artist, well respected in the folk writing and.
Do you think someday the Cubs will
song
put him in
performance.
the utility tunnel of fame?
You know what? They fucking should.
They should. He
honestly.
should have been in the first. He should have been when they first did it.
I didn't think about that. He'll have to settle for that post office.
He's got to wait for
at
Jeff
Southport
Garland to go in
in
probably
Irving.
before he can go.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, a really sad story too because he died young. He wasn't even like 40, and he died in '84. He wrote "Go Cubs Go." It
He
was
died
the
just a
intro
few
to
days
the-
before the clincher. He didn't even get to see the.
Yeah. So, yeah, kind of a tough deal, but immortalized in "Go Cubs Go," which again, I think you're right. He did that out of irony more than anything else. And the other funny thing was on television. The intro was 1984 Van Halen's "Jump" from the 1984 album, and that was also the song that they played. That even though they always had an organist, didn't they also play it at the park when they would take the field?
Yes, and they did it forever.
Yeah.
For
And they would bring it back to the kind of dormant, bring it back. So, yeah, a couple soundtracks for 1984 for you.
Yeah, as a treat to the fans, I played the entire 2-minute intro to
Yep.
WGN games that year at the
Yep.
top of this podcast, right before my
So
infamous
it's
intro.
the jump intro, then Milo talking about the
Milo talks
sponsors
right over it.
Over Eddie playing
It's
the
2 minutes
guitar
long
solo.
because they also work in the MLB disclaimer, so that Harry didn't have to read it on the air during games.
Do they not read the disclaimer anymore?
I don't know if they do or if
Accounts,
nobody
pictures,
does it live
descriptions.
anymore. I don't even know if they bother to use.
Oh,
lot
it's
of
a
teams-
bumper.
Yeah, but I don't think you even have to do that anymore. It's like, go look at the fucking web page. I think that's probably their answer.
Yeah. True.
Right. So the Cubs, they make it look easy in the opener.
Yeah.
They
So
pound
that
out
is a-
16 hits. They score 13 runs.
Matthews had 2.
They had an
homers.
11-run lead. And Dusty left Mark Pryor in and made him pitch the. No, that's a different series. So okay, here's a good question though. With the 11-run lead, how many pitches did Jim Fry make Rick Sutcliffe pitch?
That is a good question. Would they have that in Baseball Reference? They might have it for a.
He pitched 7 innings. It doesn't look like they have pitches. He faced 28 batters.
Yeah, I mean he wasn't struggling. He didn't give up any runs.
No, he gave up. He did walk 5. He
Ah,
made a run.
yeah,
Ryan Dempster had to best him for most walks in an opener, but Rick walked 5, but he also had an 11-run lead, so he could pitch around guys.
and a nice big home run himself onto the. The game was so ridiculous. Was Tom Verizor the starting? Oh, that was the last game of the other season. Sorry, I was like, wait a second. But yeah, Sutcliffe not only homer, but he hit one out on a Sheffield, which I think it's proven it's a little bit harder to reach the street in right field than left, or at least it was then. And then a couple things too is that they didn't have real umpires for these games, and that was one of the reasons why we didn't like Drysdale, because they were almost like using that as an excuse. Felt like for the Padres. But the second game when Trout takes the hill, the great thing about that was where Dernier got on, and then Sandberg hit a bouncer to third, and I think he either beat the throw or he was out. But Dernier went from first to third, and then beat the. And of course, the umpire was out of position. Still made the right call.
Wait, are you saying that Dave Kavanaugh, Dave Slickenmeyer, Joe Pomponi, and Joe Maher weren't real umpires?
I remember the name Kavanaugh too.
I like this. It was 63 degrees with a 20-mile-an-hour wind in an unknown direction. All right. We don't know where it's windy, but we don't know where it's coming from. Does anybody know where the wind is coming from? No? The flags are all pointing different ways?
Swirling, the old crosswind. Yeah, the real umps came back for Game 5, I remember.
Just in time to fuck us, didn't they? Just in time to
guess.
fuck us. Of course they did. That's when they made it back. Now, Game 2 was an actual competitive.
It was. In fact, what I remember too is that Lee Smith got the save, but like Henry Cotto got the last out. He was in for defense for Sarge.
He got it
Terry
right
Kennedy
up against the wall. Basically, if you picture former Cub Angel Pagan trying futilely to catch Javi's home run in Game 1 of the 2016 NLDS.
Yep.
That ball the ball that Cotto caught was about 2 feet farther in. That was it. Otherwise, the Cubs blows the lead. Or ties it. Was there only 1 on or was there 2 on?
I thought it would have tied it. Oh,
it
would have tied it.
They might still be playing.
Yeah, Lee always made it interesting.
Yeah, he got Garvey ground out. He walked Kevin McReynolds. No,
David had Davey Lopes for defense and right field. By the way, they acquired Davey Lopes at the trade deadline, and that actually meant bad news for Jay Johnstone. That's why Jay Johnstone was not on the playoff roster.
Right. So we know Jay has told the famous story that Fry hated him, thought he was a smartass. Go figure. Actually, Fry just was a humorless dick. He just really was. So he didn't like Johnstone, and so he didn't want him on the playoff roster, and he convinced Dallas to leave him off the playoff roster, and he thought he was done with him. Like, we don't have to see him. And Dallas called Jay in, and he said, Jay, we don't have a spot for you on the playoff roster, but I'm going to make you the shower coach. And Jay's like, what's the shower coach? He's like, when the guys come in after the game, you point to the showers to let them know where they are. He said, you can be in uniform for the entire playoff run, because we're going to need somebody to point the guys to the showers. And so Jay shook his head and said thanks, and was there anyway, and basically gave Fry the finger every day after that. Actually, so in the ninth inning with a 4-2 lead, Jim Fry let Steve Trout pitch.
Oh,
he got Garvey ground out. He walked Kevin McReynolds, and he took him out.
Okay,
it was a double switch. Davey Lopes.
That's what put Lopes in.
Davey Lopes came in.
Why the hell did you not get Merlin out of
right
earlier?
field?
Yeah.
Lee came in, struck out Carmelo Martinez,
former Cub the year before. Hit home run.
Terry Kennedy flew out. Missed a home run by about a foot. And the Cubs were up 2-0 and on their way to the World Series, and nothing can stop us. And this is going to be great.
In 15 years of divisional play, the Brewers had come back in 2 years earlier, down 2-0, and I think in that 81 sort of ad hoc divisional series, I think that one of the teams, Dodgers or whatever, came down, but it was very rare.
So is this the part where we debunk the Cub urban legend?
We've done it before,
right? That the games were supposed to be opposite. No. The Cubs were supposed to have the home games.
It was the National League West turn in '84. What would have happened? I think
even at that point, it wouldn't have made any sense, because the weekend games could easily have been day games.
Correct, and
ABC didn't want the first 2 games during the week to be during the day. So they would have switched it the other way. They wouldn't have switched it the way that it was.
Yeah, they always back then, even because they didn't. Nowadays, you have multiple platforms, so you put both games on prime time, I guess. But like back then, one network has the playoffs. They're gonna have to put a game on during the day, like when our grandparents would listen to games with the earbud in their ear. So that was a no-brainer. I think they would have switched it for the World Series, because the National League did have home field in '84, and the American League set was on the weekend. Because I remember Alan Trammell's 2-homer game was a daytime World Series, one of the last that I remember seeing.
See, I don't think they were going I think what happened was
in '85, though, and the next year, they would have had to play in St. Louis.
In St. Louis. And that, I think everybody has basically conflated those two things.
Correct. They said that Bowie Kuhn robbed us of a home game. Somehow that just became a total urban myth. Not true. Because back then, home field advantage was preset, and if you want to double check. Now, granted, they went to a best of 7 the next year.
Yes.
But the team that had home field the next year was because that was the Dodgers series with the Cardinals. I don't know. I'd have to. You can easily pick it apart. I know that's not the case. So, and the other thing we talked about, Johnstone being left off. I mentioned Rich Bordy being left off the playoff roster. My dad was particularly upset that Rick Russell, who had left the Cubs. We got Doug Bird for him in '81 to help the Yankees the World Series, then immediately blew out his elbow, worked his way back with the Cubs, and actually he won a couple games in '84. He had like a 5 ERA, but we were always upset that Dallas Green, not being very sentimental like we were, didn't give Russell a roster spot. Instead, gave it to his old guy Warren Brewster. We were never huge Warren Brewster fans, but
yeah. Well, the Russell thing would have been charity, but Bordy was literally one of their best relievers. It didn't make any sense that they left him off. Apparently it was, we doesn't have any playoff experience. How the fuck is he supposed to get playoff experience if he won't pitch him in a playoff game?
Yeah.
Brewster
the only
sucks.
game, but Brewster didn't pitch in the playoffs except
He did. He
close
pitched.
out.
He mopped up game 1, which is fine. It didn't.
But the only game where the bullpen would have been a factor was game 4. Both Tim Stoddard and Smith gave up runs. I don't like the bullpen was not why they lost, so it turned out not to be an issue. Basically, Eckersley didn't have it in game 3, and game 4 was just a wild back and forth game, and Sutcliffe ran out of gas in game 5.
But see, that's what makes me wonder. So I did a few years ago. I did a rewatch of Game 5. I'd seen it as a kid and had never watched it again. And I rewatched it and I wrote a running diary of it. Because one of the things we talked about a lot as Cub fans was why did Jim Fry try to save Sutcliffe to pitch Game 1 of the World Series? In other words, we don't need him to pitch. We're going to win.
Well, it would have been on game 4, which went to Sanderson. It would have been Sutcliffe on short rest.
Right. So the reason I felt like I debunked it because, I mean, it was hot. It would have been a night game, which would have been a little better for Big Rick. But the Sunday game was an afternoon game, and he visibly gets tired. The Cubs have a 3-0 lead, and he's out there with his tummy and his big beard, which
portly.
Neither of those things look like they'd be a lot of fun in the heat. And he starts to wear out, which made me wonder then why your ace needed to be pitching with an 11-run lead in Game 1.
Oh, yeah. Well,
could there have been a few bullets? But also, when you look back, I mean, it's a different time. 84 was a different time. I mean, the fact that nobody gave shit Fry for the fact that his starting pitchers were starting 9th innings in these big games and then having to be relieved. Because that's how everybody did it. That was your starters were your best pitchers. Your relievers were mostly the guys
even
who
the
weren't good enough to start.
Lineup.
And you weren't going to put them in unless you absolutely had to.
And I'm just going to say, Lee Smith was a little shaky in 84. He proved it. He gave up the homer to Garvey. He was so dominant the 2 years before, and he's pretty dominant after too. But he was a high wire act. That seems like a lot in 84. Maybe that's nitpicking, but
probably.
Yeah, probably. Hey, let me have it.
The turning point moment.
But that is another analogy. Go ahead.
What was the analogy?
Well, a prior analogy about the workload in the previous, because there are a lot of other analogies, right? Like you have like Sutcliffe goes 14 games in a row. Wood and Pryor don't lose back to back both years. The Cubs have 3 cracks to win one game. There is a lot of airy parallel. That is kind of another one, but that's a little bit revisionist, like you said, because the proper context is nobody would have ever considered pulling Sutcliffe that early. We were screaming, like, why the hell is Pryor still in this game in 2003? So
the turning point in this series was Game 4, and it was the Cubs' complete inability to get Steve Garvey out. It's not just the home run that you see over and over and over again, which he swings late and he doesn't. It's, the whole thing, it's like, how the fuck did he even hit that thing out? But if you go through the game log here, whenever a batter drives in a run, his name is bold. Garvey's fucking name is bold every goddamn time. In the 3rd inning, he doubles and scores, drives in Alan Wiggins. In the 5th inning, he singles and he drives in Tim Flannery. In the 7th inning, he singles and he drives in Chris Brown. And this is a back and forth game, and he keeps tying it. Every time the Cubs get a lead, fucking Steve Garvey ties it until tied at 5 in the 9th with 1 out. Tony Gwynn gets a single off Lee Smith, and then Garvey hits a homer. And the Padres win 7-5, and now we gotta. That's gonna fuck up our day because we're gonna watch Walter Payton set the all-time break Jim Brown's record in the morning, and now we got an afternoon baseball game when we were gonna just be celebrating the Cubs were going to the World Series on Saturday, and then watch Walter on Sunday.
My brother, first of all, my parents went out, which they hardly ever did back then. They went out to a party, and my dad was superstitious, so I'm sure he was nervous about doing it. My brother had people over. That's what you do. Parents are gone. People are gonna be over here. And all I remember is my brother just standing up and saying, hey, Garvey hits his home run. All this means is that Steve Trout's going to pitch the first game of the World Series. He's trying to believe it, right? Same guy that was at the game in 2003, the Bartman game, and he called me. He's like, "Is that all you got?" I think deep down, even he knew it. You also mentioned like Harry on the radio. He did do the playoff. I've heard a compilation with Garvey's hits and Harry.
There's a lot of that,
and it's like Garvey does it again, and he was
4 for 5 with 5 RBIs
right
in that game.
He drove in every run.
No, 5 of the 7.
7. It was 7 to 5. Jesus.
So another thing to make to just make it really irritating was after the 1982 season, Garvey was a free agent, and he narrowed it down to 2 teams. The Dodgers didn't want him back, and he was either going to sign with the Cubs or he was going to sign with the Padres.
I don't want him.
I didn't want him, but if he'd have been a Cub, he wouldn't have been on the fucking Padres.
Yeah.
Here's what I would have done. I would have signed him, and I would have benched him. I would have never played him, just so he could have never played against us. No, I mean you know why he signed with the Padres. So here's this all-time winner. You know, the guy who broke Billy Williams' record for consecutive games. And now the Dodgers are like, fuck, we don't want you. And now he's got to pick between 2 dog-ass teams: the 82 Cubs and the Padres.
Yep.
Because everybody's looking around like Garvey's washed up. Nobody's going to pay him any money. And you know why he stayed in San Diego? Because he had to stay close to his 11 illegitimate kids that nobody knew he had. But I guarantee you that's why he stayed on the West Coast. So fuck that dude.
Well, all right, I'll buy it. I never liked Garvey. Played for the Dodgers, right? Pretty boys. I always kind of because I like Bill Buckner, I always kind of felt like Bill Buckner that the Dodgers chose Buckner, so screw them. They don't know what they had. Garvey was the first baseman. Buckner had to play left field when he was in LA. He right-handed hitter. I don't know. It's he never, he just I'm speechless.
No, I think the fact that he came that close to signing with the Cubs was just proof that the Cubs had so little. The Dallas was basically looking at any because team construction wise, the last thing that team needed, you already had
Buckner was at his prime,
and you were trying to find a spot for Durham to play every day. The last thing you needed was to take that dwarf and play with his big forearms.
That's why I have a tough time buying. That's why I have a tough time buying it, unless like Bill Buckner, because it is kind of like I said to start the show. I mean, Buckner was he was a fixture right up until 2 months into the '84 season, and it just seemed weird because he played another 5 years. Guy probably had about 2,500 career hits. Yeah, Peyton sets the record the next day, and then Brent Musburger interviews him from the studio, and he actually asks him, what's going to happen later on today. Even Walter was asked. Of course, he said the Cubs are going to win.
They're going to choke. Brent, what do you think they're going to do? You grew up in Chicago, Brent. You knew. You're a Cub fan.
And that game 5, it was such a crusher game 4, very much like the Bartman game, right? Where it's like, just like in game 7 and 03, when fucking first Wood hits a homer, or first it's a Lou and then Wood, and the place goes nuts. In this game, Durham and Davis, who both homered the night before, the damage was done. Slog, right? They had a 3-0 lead, and like you said, you already kind of described it, Sutcliffe just kind of laboring in the sun, and San Diego kept kind of chipping further and further, and just to see it slip away, to experience that, it was just what a brutal end to just an incredible, surprising season.
Yeah. So the Padres led 2-0 after 3. The Cubs got the lead right back, 3-2 in the 4th.
You're talking about the Saturday night game. Sorry.
Yeah. Padres tied it in the bottom of the 5th. Well, my network crapped out, so I didn't hear part of what you said.
I was talking about the Sunday game when, after a brutal loss, just like in 03 when Wood and, they homered, the Cubs jumped out the next day even after that. So, but yeah, the Saturday game was just a wild back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Padres are up 2-0 after 3. The Cubs take the lead in the 4th, up 3-2. The Padres tie in the bottom of the 5th. The Padres then go up 5-3 in the 7th, and he's like, the Cubs are screwed. But then the Cubs tie it in the 8th. And then the Padres win it.
Keith Moreland with a single, Jody with a double. Yeah, they took the lead on back-to-back homers off of 2 in the 4th. Jody had a 2-run homer, then Durham, and then Jody had a big game that night.
And then the top of the 9th, with the tilt still tied, the great Tom Verizor led off, but he popped out. Dernier doubled. Sandberg popped out to 3rd. Matthews walked. Cotto got hit by a pitch, so Say's up with the bases loaded.
Yep.
and he grounded out to second.
A coked out Alan Wiggins, no doubt.
So it's all Ronce's fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boo! You ruined our childhood, Ron.
Bob Costas was hosting NFL Live. He was the Brett Musburger did the CBS show. I remember even young Bob Costas at the end of like recapping the NFL games expressed his condolences to the Cubs, and I was just like,
fuck off,
bursting out in tears. What a rough day. And you're right. It was like it should have been a joyous day. Sweetness set the NFL rushing mark very same day. But no. Thus endeth our innocence, Andy. In the future would be teenagers. Baseball might become a little less important, blah, blah, blah. And we'd wait, 32 more years.
So if the Cubs had won on Saturday night, who would have been the NLCS MVP? Here are your candidates. Rick Sutcliffe for 7 scoreless innings and a home run in Game 1.
That's it, though, yeah.
Let's see. Jody Davis hit 389 in the series, although this also obviously includes Game 5.
Yep. Right.
Sandberg hit 368.
Yep. Matthews, did he not do it?
He hit 200. Although he did have a 429 on base and a 600 OPS, or slugging, so he might have. Cub pitchers.
That is a good question.
Warren Brewster pitched in 3 games.
Really?
Didn't give up a run. He'd have been your NLCS MVP.
Well, one of the bitter pills.
And as a kid, I always thought his name was Warren Brewstar because of the way he spelled it with that stupid Brustar.
Right. And then it'd be made more confusing with a Richard Pryor, John Candy vehicle the following summer, Brewster's Millions, which involved baseball and Richard Pryor wearing a Cubs jersey. The one bitter pill about how it all went down too was like Eric Shaw. You mentioned him. We mentioned him in the 1987 cast when he hit Andre Dawson in the face. Which, by the way, I was at Woodfield for that, watching Spaceballs. So maybe Rick Moranis is the reason I can't watch Cubs games. But Eric Shaw was their ace, and he got lit up in that first game, and he was getting lit up in that Game 5. That's who Jody and Durham. So Eric Shaw gave up homers to. Let's see, Rick Sutcliffe, Bob Dernier, and Gary Matthews in Game 1, and then Jody Davis and Leon Durham in Game 5. He got it. Dick Williams gave him a quick hook, and then we watched as a parade of Padre relievers like Greg Booker and Greg Harris and former Cub Craig Lefferts, who was a pretty effective rookie the year before, completely shut the Cubs down once Eric Shaw got out of the game. And watching Lefferts, who had a pretty interesting career. We brought him up before. He was involved in like a lot of weird trades, I think. But Lefferts and Carmelo Martinez were dealt in that 3-way trade that landed us Scott Sanderson, who couldn't gut it out with a better performance in Game 4. So
that was kind of Scott Sanderson's entire career.
I know.
The ability to gut it out.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was the thing. Yeah, it was either Sanderson or Sutcliffe on short rest. And the Padres were dealing with the same thing. Dick Williams come back with Eric Shaw or go with Tim Lawler. Well, Eric Shaw sucks. Rick Sutcliffe's awesome. So how is that a choice? Nevertheless.
So I think we've settled on greatest free agent signing in Cub history being John Lester over Andre Dawson. Those are probably your 2 candidates.
For sure.
But it's got to be, there can't even be close, right? The greatest trade acquisition of all time in Cubs history is Rick Sutcliffe, who all he did in 1984 for the Cubs was go 16-1. That's a .941 winning percentage, including, and then he also went 1-1 in the playoffs. 2.69 ERA. He allowed 123 hits in 150 innings. He struck out 155, and he only walked 39 guys. His ERA plus for the Cubs that year was 1.44, which actually was only that's only in 14 games. That's right. It was easily the highest. He had 140 one year.
Right.
Very few games.
And if you watch the games, like on a lift, you watch when he pitched down the stretch, he always, like, when they needed a stopper performance, he did it. He was just, we had the analogy of 84 and 03 and blowing the 3, a chance to win with 3 chances. Another interesting analogy, it was like the unprecedented performance between amongst Sutcliffe and Jake Arrieta, which I think Jake's might have been a little bit stronger statistically, but both were. Arrieta's was different because it was really in 2015, but it also carried through the playoffs, and he also kind of ran out of gas that year. But not before punctuating it in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, if the I was talking about Sutcliffe being the best in-season acquisition ever, like the guy you trade for, and that you narrowly edging Nick Castellanos on the 2019 Cubs.
Yeah,
he was the only guy. He was the only guy who hit for the 2019 Cubs after the.
I know they still lost.
So one of the reasons you're like, why did the Indians trade Rick Sutcliffe? Well, he was going to be a free agent. The Cubs had to sign Rick after this big season, and they did. They signed him to a huge contract. Do you know it was a 5-year contract? Do you know how much total money the Cubs paid Rick Sutcliffe after he went 16-1 and won the Cy Young?
Not without looking.
He signed a 5-year, $9 million contract.
Wow.
Not $9 million a year for 5 years. $9 million over 5 years.
And you know what makes that even better is that contract was probably seen as outrageous and part of the impetus.
You're going to pay him $1.5 million a year?
But like collusion started like a year after that. So it was like probably like one of the last, like, oh my God, Sutcliffe's got $9 million. Probably this has got to stop.
Yep.
Because within 2 years, owners found their asses in court for colluding to control those. So the other thing too that Sutcliffe, there was a brief period of time when we thought he was going to leave and go home to Kansas City, where he was from. The Cubs had to court him and bring him back, and he was an anchor. He was he almost won another Cy Young in '87. He was an excellent pitcher. He was worth that contract, even though he got hurt in the next year. And went only 8-7. Then another year he was like 4-12, but he also had some solid seasons.
So if you want to know why Rick Sutcliffe is still schlepping it on Marquee, that's why. Because he cashed in off his one big season and he made $9 million over 5 years. He made $19 million total in his big league career, which you can live on that. Well, we talked about before we started that we were both going to be big Cub fans regardless. It was our parents' fault, our dad's fault.
Yeah.
We were stuck.
84 just made us crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that we're at the level of our Cub fandom, I'm sure, was 1984 is a huge part of it.
We went right back into the shitter then, right? Like 85 got off to the good start, and then then 86 it was. From that point, we set out on that course that we were pretty much on, with the exception of like a Lou Piniella blip, and then the Theo era, where they're actually good for more than a few years. Like we would spend the next 20 years after 84 in search of this, but never having any consistent pattern.
They went from 1972 until 2008 till 2004 without having back-to-back winning seasons.
Correct. 1993 was only their third winning season in 20 years, first without winning a division. I mean, basically 93 and 95 were the only other 2 years that they were over 500, that they didn't win a division. 98, they got back to the playoffs. So up until the aughts, they'd only been 500 team 5 times.
Yeah.
5 times.
If you became a Cub fan in 2003,
they
had a winning record in 2003, 2004,
2007,
2007,
8, 9, and maybe 10.
And then you had to wait.
Not.
No, not 10.
Oh, okay. And then it was 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. No, 18. They were under 500 19. Amazing.
No, they weren't. They won 84 games.
Oh, they just missed the playoffs.
Yep.
And then they went back in 20. Okay, yeah.
20,
that was the run.
Then so you've had basically just it's a handful of sub 500. So you don't know what it's like to be a Cub fan. You really don't.
That Theo run
that's fine.
had
I don't
more,
wish that on you.
That Theo run had more above 500, more consecutive above 500 seasons, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 6, than we had our entire lives until like 04, like aggregate. So 84, 89, 93, 95, 98. Our sixth 500 season was 2003. So, yeah, you're right. It's a whole different perspective. If you're that kid that was born like in 1999, the Bears would be like a laughing stock, and the Cubs are actually the gold standard.
Yeah, you don't understand why everybody makes, because I'm sure people still make them, but people make
Right.
Cub jokes. What? No, they're the good team. You don't make fun of them.
Like what you said about like the Phillies trade to start the show. That absolutely. Now that you mention it, like there must have been like,
Yeah, it was a safe place to park those guys. It wasn't going to come back to haunt them until it
Nope.
did.
yeah, everything changed, man. And so just to be there, it was fun to relive it. But it was, interesting to just stop outside ourselves, 38 years later, and just to actually be there when that happened, because you didn't really see it coming, and it wasn't the same after. But
So the 84 Cubs used 18 pitchers, which actually in this era of Cub baseball is a lot, because we hit years where they had used 12 for an entire season. Remember, if they have 13 they'll have 13 on their roster on opening day this year, and there was entire seasons where they only used 12 pitchers total. Guys who you may not have remembered pitched for the 84 Cubs. Dickie Knowles.
Yep, still hanging on.
Porfi Altamirano, we talked about Porfi.
Yep,
Reggie Patterson pitched in 3 games.
Oh, yeah. And then he got shot. He got shot after the season in South America playing winter ball. And I only remember that it happened like a week after Simeon star Ben Wilson got shot and killed in Chicago. Reggie Patterson also shot. He survived it though, and in the next year would come back in time to serve up Pete Rose's 191st hit that tied Ty Cobb. So that happened at Wrigley Field the next year.
Let's see. Bill Johnson and Don Schultz.
Don Schulze.
Oh, it's Schulze. Oh, yeah, there's
Don
no
Schulze.
There's no team.
Yeah, he's a local guy. Local part. He went to Lake Park High School. Best known for Ted Janulius, a.k.a. the San Diego Chicken, fucking with Don Schulze in a minor league game, separating his shoulder, and Don Schulze sued the Chicken.
Good.
And Schulze then would also be best known as being part of that Rick Sutcliffe trade. He went the other way with Joe Carter and Mel Hall and Darrell Banks, no relation to Ernie, in exchange for Sutcliffe, George Frazier, who lost 3 games in the 81 World Series for the Yankees, and Ron Hassey.
Oh, that's another thing I want to talk about. So, a lot of talk. I don't want to make this too contemporary because it'll date it, but Cubs opening day roster in 2023 is likely to include 3 catchers for no good fucking reason.
Did Bobby Cox come out of retirement?
So Michael Cerami from Bleacher Nation had this tweet about how it's very common. The Cubs have had a 3-catcher team for basically ever since 2016, and he listed all these seasons, and he was fucking wrong. Is what he was. In 2016, yes, they had 3 catchers. Once they brought Wilson up, they used 3.
They all had an RBI in Game 7.
In 2017, they didn't have 3. Ross was gone. It was just Miguel and Wilson until Montero got released when the Nationals ran all over him and Arrieta.
Yep.
He didn't list 2018 because it wasn't. 2019 was not a 3-catcher thing, except Wilson got hurt right before the trade deadline, which necessitated the trade for the great Martin Maldonado, who didn't get a hit, and then they traded him again. And then he got hurt after. Wilson got hurt after the trade deadline. 2020, the rosters were all weird because of COVID. And they did actually use 3 catchers because Ross, for some reason, felt the need to DH Victor Caratini.
Oh, that's right.
2021, they didn't have 3 catchers. They barely had 2 because remember they used all those backups. They had like 8 backup catchers.
I remember that. Yep.
But anyway, so it made me wonder because I knew we were doing this. The 1984 Cubs. They got Ron Hassey in the trade for Rick Sutcliffe, and they already had Steve Lake and Jody Davis. So did that make them a 3-catcher team? And you think
I can't remember.
It probably did, except for the fact that they never let Ron Hassey catch. I mean, not never, but he caught.
He pulled a hamstring playing first base. I remember.
For the 84 Cubs, Ron Hassey caught 6 games.
Yeah.
So no,
he got it for his bat, I guess. And I remember it now. He pulled his hamstring while playing first base. He hardly ever played for
I kind of think maybe they got him with the idea that he would replace Lake.
Yes.
And then he couldn't.
He got hurt.
He only played in 19 games.
Yeah, Ron Hassey, another one of those guys that you only existed in baseball cards if you were a National League fan because we didn't have interleague play.
How many positions did Keith Moreland start at for the 84 Cubs?
Did he start a catcher in 84?
He did. He caught 2 games. He started.
I can't believe
he
started
a
catcher.
Yes.
I'm going to say.
I assume these were both before
Mel Hall.
Before he became the right fielder.
Well, so I'm going to say right, left, first, third, and catcher.
He did play left, but he didn't start. He played first, third. He started 5 games at third, 24 games at first, and 88 games in right field.
Yeah.
So the guy we think of as the right fielder for the entire season barely started half the games in right field.
Wow. He did make a diving catch in game 1 of the playoff series.
Yeah, the ball was hit 3 feet away from him.
Wow.
And he did legitimately have to dive, but it's only because he couldn't.
He did kick Ed Lynch's ass. Let us not forget.
No,
he was
Zonk was a Zonk. I refer to him with that terrible nickname.
Yeah.
That was his nickname. He was a cool guy to have on your team. Like he was a hard ass. Although he was like this versatile player who wasn't as versatile as the Cubs tried to make him. Like, hey, we can play him at third. Like,
he wasn't really good at any of them.
You shouldn't, but you can. Yes. Like, he has a glove and he can stand there, but he shouldn't play there. But basically, you could tell he was one of those guys where they said, "Go do this." He's like, "I'll do it," and he would go do it.
Dallas Green loved him, first of all, and even in '87 when they signed Dawson, that was Moreland's last year, and he gamely did his best to play third base. He was our regular third baseman in '87.
It was not like that. It was good. It wasn't that good. Is that what 88? No, that was there was a little gap there before the great Vance Law, right? No, Vance Law probably came in '88 because he was an All-Star in '89.
That's right. 2 years for Vance Law.
Yeah,
that
was
Luis
Salazar.
Yes, and then we go into it. Gary Scott. Yeah,
Steve Buechele.
My
favorite,
Leo Gomez.
Steve Buechele.
Yeah. We should just do an episode.
Leo
of
Gomez and Willie Green. I mean, those. I don't know how both of those guys. And the
how dare you forget Shane Andrews? If you're going to mention Willie Green, you got to bring some Shane Andrews. Cole Liniak, remember him? When the Cubs got him for Rod Beck.
Hendrick Wisdom and Edwin Rios. Oh wait, I'm sorry, that's correct.
Tiny little Nick Madrigal.
Yeah, we do remember this crap 2023, and we have to talk about Nick Madrigal for 10 minutes. It's really.
It'll just be an hour of naming third baseman. Tom Verizor was another two-dimensional Topps player. It existed only in my imagination as an American leaguer till he came over because he had those sunglasses that had those obnoxious the sunglasses over the hat.
We had a kid on our little league team who had to wear glasses, and we called him Tom Verizor.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
of that card.
He did not like it.
That's a 78 Tom Verizor Topps, and like boom, he's on our team. Now, Tom Verizor also, I believe, one of the deceased members of the '84 Cubs, the first of whom I want to say was the aforementioned Gary Woods, who dined out on Steve Carlton as a player. Poor Gary passed about 7 or 8 years ago. Tom Verizor died a little more recently.
Tom Verizor thing, when you told me about this, and we looked him up on Baseball Reference, and why Baseball I mean, I know Baseball Reference. They've got a lot of info. Why they need this info, I don't know. Under Tom Verizor, it said he was born February 11th, 1953 in Port Jefferson, New York. He died July 8th, 2014 at 61 years, 147 days old at Islip, New York. And buried, he was cremated.
Yes.
Why is buried a thing? Literally, this is where people go to look up. I'd like to go see the grave of somebody.
Right.
Baseball Reference has that. Like, why? I'm surprised they don't have where his ashes were scattered.
Right. That's a little too personal.
I mean, you have to. That's on the subscription part, like where you can see the pitcher-batter matchups. You can find out where Tom Verizor's ashes were scattered.
Where they were scattered, somewhere over Tiger Stadium used to be.
And Islip, probably.
Yeah, but yeah, I believe. And then Jay Johnstone, moment of silence, recently passed. Right, unfortunately, and Bill Buckner is technically a member of the '84. So that's the Bring Out Your Dead segment of Remember This Crap. The four, I believe that's it. The four '84 Cubs who are no longer with us. There could be more. I don't know, but I got my antenna to. I have a feeling like if Porfy Alcamarino shuffles off this mortal coil, I'll catch wind of it and I'll note it.
Yeah, Johnstone looks like the oldest. He was 74.
Okay, a decent run. Still a little young to die.
Because Sanderson was 62.
Oh, Sanderson also, yeah.
Oh, you didn't say Scott. I said Scott. Yeah, Scott Sanderson.
No, I didn't. I forgot Sanderson died too. All within the last 10 years, too, I want to say. Gary Woods, I'm pretty sure, is the first one to pass. It should be on Gary Woods' headstone, his career mark against. It's probably even in his obituary. Insane, because it wasn't even like a minuscule sample size. I mean, they weren't in the same division. I mean, Gary Woods was a quasi regular player for a few years with Houston.
Well, it's kind of the let's see. Gary Woods most at bats he ever had in a season were 239 with the Blue Jays in 77.
Yeah.
And 270 with the 82 Cubs. Actually, that was the most. 270 with the 82 Cubs. As close as he came to being a regular. Played 117 games. But it's kind of like Bob Uecker famously had really good numbers against Sandy Koufax.
Yep. I mean, you mentioned that. Woods, here it is. He was batted 252 with the Cubs, batted 242 with Oakland, Toronto, Blue Jays, Astros, Cubs. Woods batted 348, 16 for 46 lifetime against Hall of Fame left-handed. If you look up Steve Carlton's per, Woods, if you sort it by like that, like Woods will be towards the top. So just one of those funny things. Steve Carlton, one of the greatest pitchers of the 20th century. Could not get middling Gary Woods out. And I got to see Gary Woods break up a no-hitter at Wrigley Field and shove it up that one dumbass fan just because his dad took him to see Jim Maloney do that in the 60s.
Let's see who else. Let's see. Billy Hatcher made his big league debut in 1984 in September.
Oh. No Darren Jackson, though.
No. Billy
Hatcher, we brought up Billy Hatcher. He had a unique career.
Yeah, he had
a big postseason series for Houston against the Mets, and then the World Series. Was he MVP? I think 1990 for the Reds.
I don't know if he was. But he should have been.
He wasn't MVP. He had like 10 hits or something.
MVP so his career playoff slide. And see, maybe Cubs should have activated him in '84.
No.
Little did they know his career playoff slash line. He batted .404 with a .466 on base and a .654 slug. In the 1990 World Series against the mighty Oakland A's.
Yeah.
He was 9 for 12.
Wow. 750.
Scored 6 runs. He had 4 doubles and a triple. He slugged. He batted .750 with an 800 OBP and a .1250 slug. His OPS for the World Series and his all-time since no one ever played in is 2.050.
Damn. He was like Steve Garvey in that series.
It was. It was like that one game from Garvey, except.
Yes, they're right. It was just that one game. But yeah, right. Somewhere out there's just hearing going, Garvey does it again.
But
I would.
The Cubs. I don't remember. I should know this. Who did the Cubs trade him for? Oh yeah, that's
who.
Right. That's great.
Billy Hatcher. Let me guess. Billy Hatcher would have been traded for. Was it Jerry Mumphrey?
It was Jerry Mumphrey.
Yeah, we discovered that.
Billy Hatcher and Steve Engel.
I remember Steve Engel was one of the many bad arms that came up in '85 when the pitchers all went on the DL, along with Jay Baller, Derek Botello.
Good bit of self-scouting by the Cubs to know what they had in their system because, let's see, Billy in 1987, so the first full year after the trade, hit .296 with a .352 on base and a .415 slug for the Astros.
Well,
I'm sure
the Cubs
87 Cubs had
with
all kinds of talent. So
well, it was like an old Dernier and Mumphrey, I guess. That's how yeah. That's another thing to mark if we ever break down the long, sad, woeful history of center field for the Cubs. Billy Hatcher's another one.
Yeah, we have to put the what ifs on there too, not just the
right. Well, if there's something we forgot to mention about '84, then
I'm sure
tough shit.
I'm sure the people will tell us.
Maybe.
But yeah, so there's the great Cub team of our youth, and it was probably the perfect experience for a Cubs fan, in that we saw the highest of highs, and then
and then get reminded of how life is. Like, this can't happen to us. This year's been too good. Nobody loses 3 in a row, right? So, Yeah, a nice life lesson, but still a privilege to have gone through it because it was just not anything we expect. We were going to be fans come hell or high water, so we were going to be there regardless. But to see it unfold is just kind of an incredible thing.
So I believe it was, if I do this right, from 1980, the Cubs made the playoffs in 84, 89, 98,
03, 07, 08.
07, and 08. And then, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So six times in a row that they made the playoffs. They lost 3 games in a row in every single appearance.
Holy shit, you are right. They got swept in 98. They lost 3 in a row in San Fran. They lost 3 in a row in 03. In every single season, because they did not get swept 3 by the Braves in 03. And then
it's up to
07.
That's right. In 03. No, they lost 3 games in a row. They finished that season by losing 3 in a row to the Marlins. Basically, their playoff.
That's how their season ended.
Their playoff season ended with a 3-game losing streak every single time.
Every single
6 times in a row.
And then even the first Theo team it did also. There was 4 in a row there, and that was it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
It went until
because even in 2017, they lost the first 3.
Yeah, they didn't.
Then won.
They salvaged one. That broke their streak.
It was Arrieta's list. Yeah, and then 18 was a one and done, and then 20 they lost 2. Okay, interesting. Never considered it that.
They are on I guess they're on a 4-game playoff losing streak, right?
Well, that's not as bad as the one that they were on, beginning with Game 4 in Florida, where was that 9? They lost the last 3 in 03, and then they got swept in 07, 08. Yeah, 9 in a row.
And then actually, so they lost 10 in a row because they lost Game 1 of the Cardinals series, and they broke it with the wild card win. That's right. That counts. That's a playoff game, not a regular season game. It's a playoff game. The glorious postseason history of the Cubs.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's funny how one World Series win washes away a lot of that, and it's probably then poetic that they won that World Series by having to win 3 in a row to win it because they were their backs against the wall. This was a team that whenever they had faced an elimination game, I think that was the stat, right?
Yes.
How many elimination games in a row they lost?
Elimination where if they won, they move on?
Where they had to win or go home, they just lost.
Oh, right. So,
but no, it would be elimination game for for either. I guess if you call it they could have eliminated the Padres in 2 of those, in all 3 of those games, they lost them all.
Yep. They were not in that position against the Giants.
No,
they were not in that position again until the Braves, and they failed to do it the first time against the Braves.
That's what it was. I remember I tallied the whole thing up, and so it would have been
1-7
with a chance to close out the other team.
They were 1-7,
one game.
Yeah, through the Marlins, and then it didn't, and then until the Pittsburgh series. But then the other one is when they are, if they
face elimination, they pretty much go home.
Right, because it only happened once in 84, once in 89, once in 98, and then every time. They never once extended it until the World Series, right?
Yep. Which
they were never on the
brink. That must be really comforting to Cleveland fans. Yeah, this franchise that when pushed against the wall always fell through the wall.
Right.
Until you got them 3 times to win a World Series and they fought back
not just extended it by 1 game, but extended it and actually won. Because they actually did do it subsequent to that. Because the Dodgers jumped out to a 3-0 lead, and then Arrieta had his final performance at Wrigley and staved it off for a day.
Yeah.
In 20. So
right, that actually that's a huge outlier in Cub history.
Correct.
Is the being down 3-0 with a chance to get swept and don't get swept to the kind of the bare minimum of Jesus. Can we at least salvage 1 game out of this?
So that's only happened twice. Only twice in only been 2 series in our lives. I'm sorry, 3 because the Braves when they swept they could have lost. They could have gotten knocked out.
Right, because that was an elimination game for both teams, Game 5.
Yeah. All right, so 3 times. Well, I'm glad we rehashed that.
Yeah, I'm sure the fans.
I just don't know.
People who made it to the end of this 2-hour and 48-minute podcast are
well, you guys
now what are they
up.
talking about? Can we just shut this off now?
I think we're done. 32
right.
years in the books. So if you missed anything, go back and listen to it. Otherwise, I don't think we have anything else to say.
Well, Mike, this was your idea, so I want to thank you. It turned out to be a good idea.
Thank you.
As laborious as some of those seasons were, we always found a reason to rehash every one of the seasons. The toughest one was, I think, the Mike Quaddy year. That was
the end, because my own memory fritters away. After I said it before, after 08.
The treble horn year, not a lot of good there.
No, but like we were so young and into it, we're going to remember all the bad. I think after the Pinella, after the 07-08, my brain broke, so it's hard for me to maintain a memory of 9, 10, and 11. So those are hard ones for me. Actually, I found like 94, 97, 81, the shitty seasons pretty easy because the trauma is there and it doesn't take. I don't have to struggle to recall it. So, yeah, the Quaddy years were tough. Those are the ones I didn't really enjoy, but all the others, I hope the listeners found it as enjoyable as I did. As starring as it was to get there.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
For people who are worried, this is not the end of Remember This Crap. We have, it will simply take a different form. We had still lots of crap to remember.
We do.
And one last thing before we go, because I just saw this, I have besmirched Jim Fry for years because but how about this? The Pythagorean win-loss for the 1984 Cubs was 91-70, and Jim Fry outperformed it by 5 games.
Take that, hater.
Whoops.
Well, and I do think you do take a lot of shots at Jim Fry and a little bit for manager, but we saved most of our venom for Fry.
Well, yeah, I think it's all colored by because really when you look back when I rewatched Game 5, I don't know what else he could have done.
Yeah. And it was exciting.
So my anger, I think, really was from he really did fuck the franchise up as the general manager because he just had to get rid of all of Dallas. Any prospect that Dallas had, he was just going to get rid of. And
he poured salt on the ground and he burned it all. When they got him, it was exciting because he was like a celebrity manager. We didn't have managers that took teams to World Series and stuff, and he was Dallas Green's second hire after Lee Elias, so he had some cash and it paid off. So yeah, I didn't find much fault with him as a manager. In retrospect, I do a little bit, but yeah, the venom that I have for Jim Fry is entirely due to his mismanagement of the front office when he came back, and that wasn't his fault. What the hell did they hire him for?
Right, he was an idiot. Why would you? If you hire an idiot, he's going to do dumb shit.
Simple as that.
So I just had to look because in the video he talks about how he's been a part of a World Series champion and managed in a World Series. And I was trying to figure out
Baltimore Orioles.
He was
an old Orioles.
He was a
guy.
coach. He was the coach with the Orioles.
Yeah, Earl Weaver.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Andy. Catch you later.
Many of us have herpes.
I just want this to be over.